Coming in at number 5, we've got the Mogollon Monster. If you've ever taken a drive up the 87, you might have come across a set of very colorful, very large footprints tracked across the highway. While these particular prints were put there by people, they are in homage to the Mogollon Monster, aka Arizona's answer to Bigfoot. This big beastie lives along the Mogollon Rim and has been seen from Prescott all the way to Clifton. Sightings of the monster date back to early as 1903, with plenty of reports of video, tracks, and hair samples appearing since. People claim that the Mogollon Monster is a bipedal humanoid towering over most at 7 feet tall, leaving behind 22-inch footprints. Like most ape-like beasts in the woods, it has crazy strength and some wild eyes. Some claim it's covered in long black hair, others say it's reddish-brown. Maybe it changes with the seasons, or maybe there's more than one. The Mogollon Monster is also known for smelling really, really bad. Like dead fish, skunk, BO, peat moss, and snapping turtle musk. I'd hide out in the woods if I smelled like that too. Part of the reason why it's so rarely sighted is that it tends to be active at night. It will hunt and gather all sorts of different foods under cover of darkness and make little nests for itself. If you stumble across one of these pine needle refuges, get the hell out of there. This beefy monster is known to be very territorial and very violent. It reportedly likes to decapitate deer and other wildlife before digging in, and if it can pull the dome off a deer, it can pop your top off like a bottle of Coke. Be careful if you hear any weird noises too, because the Mogollon Monster likes to mimic other wildlife. Birds, coyotes, it is even reported to shriek like a woman in distress. So don't go running off to save the damsel, because you might find yourself face to face with a very hairy hunter. Tie up your supplies if you're camping too, as the monster will rummage through stuff left out.
You know, they were all about the hairy man or the wild man or something like that. And of course I didn't believe them.
This, says Wade, is a small baby Bigfoot trying to hide in the corner from his night vision camera.
Coming in at number 4, we've got El Chupacabra. Ah, the Southwest classic. Such a strange creature, the Chupacabra. Is it an alien? A demon dog? Something else? Also known as the goat sucker, these cryptids love to feed on livestock, attacking in the night. Farmers and other animal owners have often found these creatures totally hollowed out following particularly dark nights. Common features of the Chupacabra attacks are a complete lack of blood and puncture wounds in the neck and hindquarters. The wounds are always super clean, no signs of struggle or messiness. Sometimes there are weird injuries too. Cattles often have their anuses cored out, and somehow, even with these brutal injuries, no blood is found. Do the goat suckers inject some sort of sedative? Do they have magical powers? We may never know. One theory is that they have wings and descend on their prey and drain them before they have time to react. This would also explain the lack of tracks that accompany Chupacabra attacks. Although, if they were so quick and clever, wouldn't they also attack humans? Maybe our blood just doesn't taste as good. Now, this legend didn't start in Arizona, but now it's quite prevalent. El Chupacabra seems to have originated in Puerto Rico and made its way into Latin America, eventually spreading to the southwestern states. Now you'd be hard-pressed to find an Arizonan without some sort of Chupacabra story. Tucson resident Billy Nubian claims that he saw one attacking his goats late one night. He was startled awake by the panic sounds of his goats bleeding. Running outside to investigate, he saw a huge rat-like creature pinning one of his goats. It then turned to face Billy, let out a blood-curdling scream, and ran off into the dark. Sarah A. has a similar story where she encountered a half-man, half-ape creature crouching frog-style in her yard. Freaky. Coming in at number 3, we've got skinwalkers. These Navajo legends have been sighted all over, but have quite a reputation in Arizona. Medicine men possessed by spirits having to choose between good and evil. Often hermits being exiled from their communities. They take the forms of many animals and travel through the wastes. If driving through the arid desert at night wasn't unsettling enough, just wait until you hear about what skinwalkers like to do. Often they'll travel alongside lone vehicles in the dark, even when the car is hoofing it. They'll tap on the windows of the vehicle, trying to get the driver's attention. If the driver stops to see what's going on and gets out of their car, it's not likely that they're coming back. Yikes. There are some hot spots that locals try to avoid at night. Apparently there's a ranch that has been given the name Skinwalker Ranch thanks to the huge amounts of reports made, and San Carlos Reservation is also a place most will warn you away from during the night. Although most forests at night have their fair share of spooky denizens. There's one tale of a man camping alone that really makes you question whether a little adventure is worth it or not. He was hiking along with his dog and found an empty cave to set up camp in. As he unpacked his stuff, he noticed some unsettling cave paintings along the walls. Later that same night, he was woken up by his dog ferociously barking. As he sat up to see what was the matter, he saw a malformed creature slinking near the entrance of the cave. Acting quickly, he shot at it with his rifle, but this only stunned the creature. It called out to him, saying that it wanted to help. Sure. At this point, the man grabbed his dog and hightailed it out of there, leaving all his stuff. He hasn't gone back since. Hopefully he didn't leave anything too valuable behind, although he did escape with his dog and his life, which are valuable enough. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Haunted Antique Mall. Back to Tucson for more terror and troubles, there's an old 2-story furniture store that was converted into an antique mall of sorts. You know the kind, set up like a flea market with all sorts of independent booths selling their wares. Well, one day customers were walking around upstairs looking at the assorted antiques and they heard some clicking noises. One particularly curious antiquer decided to investigate and found the source. An old typewriter. The thing is, no one was around to operate it. The customers who had heard the typing were the only people upstairs. After that, more and more ghostly tales appeared. Furniture that was left neat and tidy at closing would be strewn throughout the aisles the next morning. Radios would increase in volume with no one around. Employees found themselves frozen in place from time to time, experiencing a distortion of time. They would be stuck there as customers passed by in fast or slow motion. Apparitions would appear all over, sometimes appearing as a grinning boy, other times as a mischievous-looking teenager. Nobody knows who these wraiths belong to. After hearing loud crashing noises upstairs but finding nothing displaced, the owners decided it was time to close down the upper level. Now, considering that all sorts of people were bringing in antiques from different sources, it is possible that all these ghosts came from haunted objects. Or it could be that the furniture store itself is haunted. Nobody's come up with concrete proof of the hauntings, but if you ever find yourself antiquing in Tucson, watch out for paranormal activity. And finally, at number 1, the ghosts of Slaughterhouse Canyon. I mean, the name of this canyon should be enough to give into its bad news. Let me say it again. Slaughterhouse Canyon. Come on. The tale that accompanies the terrifying name comes from the gold rush back in the 1800s. A young family moved out to try their hand at striking it rich. However, this plan did not go very well. Soon they were hungry and destitute. The father would often head out for days, searching for food to sustain him and his family. Tragically, one day he never returned. Without the father to keep them fed, the family slowly starved. As their bodies wasted away, so too did their minds. Eventually, the mother couldn't take it anymore. Her children's cries were too much for her to bear. She donned her wedding dress and ritualistically killed her children. Carrying the corpses down to the nearby river, she wept and screamed. After she dropped their bodies into the water, she wandered around until succumbing to starvation soon after. This sad story forever marred the reputation of Slaughterhouse Canyon. Now, if you visit at night, you might be able to hear the pained cries of the murderous mad mother. Tragic and terrifying. Coming in at number 5, we've got Ogopogo. Let's start with a famous one. Move over, Nessie. We've got a Canadian sea cryptid to discuss. If you've ever been to British Columbia, you'll know that there are plenty of mountains and lakes to explore. One of the more well-known ones, both for its picturesque qualities and supposed housing of a monster, is Lake Okanagan. Situated in Kelowna, this lake is famous for its vacation-friendly beaches. But if you head out looking for a relaxing day on the water, you might meet up with a strange beast. Sightings of the Ogopogo date back to 1972, but indigenous legends have been telling tales of the creature for much longer. It's described as a long, slender creature with many humps and a horse head that peeks out of the lake during thunderstorms. Sound familiar? While not nearly as famous, Ogopogo is quite similar to Nessie when you get down to it. Both are aquatic, hard to find, and attract all sorts of cryptid hunters. All sorts of folks have claimed to see Ogopogo swimming around, popping its head out of the water from time to time. Photos and videos are common, but none are really verifiable or convincing. Thankfully, the creature seems to be relatively friendly. For all these sightings and rumors, there haven't been too many claims of violence or aggression from the lake-dwelling beast. In fact, it's actually quite well liked by everyone. In the 90s, the Canadian government commissioned a postage stamp in honor of Ogopogo. Way to go. Skeptics all have their explanations for what it might actually be, with one prevalent idea claiming that it's actually a primitive whale that only comes out during calmer seasons. Regardless of whether it's real or not, what's more fun to say in the end, Nessie or Ogopogo? I'll let you guys decide. Coming in at number 4, we've got the University of Toronto Phantom Worker. If a film is being shot in Toronto, you're more than likely going to catch a glimpse of U of T's campus. The school's buildings are ornate and beautiful, perfect for giving a scholarly feel to any scene. A lot of the buildings have facades that date back to the early 19th century, giving them a timeless feel. Of course, with any buildings that have been around so long, there will be ghost stories. Back in the 1920s, U of T built a Gothic memorial to honor students who had died during the First World War. During construction of this elaborate memorial, many workers were hired to help out. Legend says that one of the workers fell from the tower while polishing the bells, a true Hunchback of Notre Dame moment. Ever since that fateful incident, students and faculty alike have claimed to see the ghost of the worker wandering around campus. Some even claim that there have been ghostly apparitions falling from the tower. Folks who don't know the legend will run to see if the poor fellow is okay, but never find a body. So much for being a good Samaritan. There are many other ghost stories surrounding the university as well, but none so stomach-dropping. Stonemasons Freemasons with murderous qualities, little girls lost in planetariums, and a baker who managed to trap his mistress inside a secret room. The stories are real, but are the ghosts still haunting the campus? I suppose you'll have to pay the institution a visit and find out. Just try not to get roped into paying tuition, alright? That's scarier than any ghost story. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Nennerlook. We've talked about urban legends from the far west coast and the most populous city, so now let's take a trip out east. Known for its quaint, peaceful charm, Newfoundland is the last place you'd expect to find terrifying urban legends, right? I mean, you can get screeched in and end up with a scary hangover and only a faint memory of your previous night, but that's something else entirely. The monster seen near Newfoundland dwells in the sea, but does so unconventionally. How do you think sea monsters usually get around? By swimming, right? Well, this thing acts a little differently than most. First sighted by Sir Humphrey Gilbert back in the 16th century, it was described as a lion-like creature. This fits the description of an Inuit cryptid known as the Nennerlook. Legends of such a creature have been passed down through generations of people, but it was considered just a legend to outsiders until Sir Humphrey Gilbert came across it himself. The Nennerlook is a gigantic beast estimated to be as tall as an iceberg. It's got white fur, huge ears, and loves to eat anything that gets close enough. Seals are the classic meal, but it won't turn down a human if they get close. Now, back to that bit about movement. The Nennerlook doesn't swim, it walks along the bottom of the ocean. Yep, not the most efficient way to get around, but it gets the job done. Imagine watching a gigantic beast just walk out of the sea towards you. This is also the reason why people say that it's not really ever seen away from shore. It makes sense considering how deep the ocean is. But if you ever spot a little antenna poking out of the water, it's time to get a move on. And if you ever hear a deafening roar, it's probably too late. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster. We'll return to Toronto for a moment, you know, because of the urban qualities of these legends. Get it? Well, every tunnel system has its fair share of legends, and the Cabbagetown Tunnel is no exception. I'm surprised nobody's gone back and tried to get footage of this strange creature. Back in the 70s, a kitten ran away from home. While searching for his lost feline, a man came across a tunnel in Cabbagetown. Thinking that the kitten might have run in here to hide, he descended down into the abyss. Scanning the darkness for any sign of the little animal, he noticed some motion off to the side. Thinking it might be what he was looking for, the man pointed his flashlight at the movement and saw something he was definitely not expecting, neither cute nor cuddly. He claims to have seen a monkey-like creature with glowing orange eyes standing at half the height of a man covered in gray fur. If that horrible sight wasn't enough, listen to this. The man froze up and kept his light trained on the monster. The monster didn't like this much and told the man in an awful, trembling voice, "Go away. Go away." And guess what the man did next? He hightailed it out of there and didn't look back. This story made its way around for a while, but nobody ever properly looked into it. That is, until a year later. The man's friend had convinced him to share his story, so he went to the Toronto Sun with the scoop. A reporter accompanied him back to the tunnel, and they both scoured the inside. Looking around, they didn't find any evidence of a monster, but they did discover the remains of a cat. Some speculate that the tunnel leads to a point in the Toronto sewer system, and others have different ideas. Either way, nobody has seen the Cabbagetown sewer monster since. Would you go looking? Finally, at number 1, we've got the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. Heading back east for a moment, let's consider the Northumberland Strait. This is a body of water that separates Prince Edward Island from Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. It's said that there is a ghost ship that sails upon the strait, more often than not totally engulfed in flame. The legend dates back over 200 years and always seems to play out the same way. Folks on land will look out to see a beautiful schooner with pure white sails. As they look on, these sails will catch fire and the whole ship starts burning. Often people will head out on rescue missions only to find that there was never a ship to begin with. Legend says that the ship will only appear before a northeast wind, predicting a storm. So where does this ghost ship come from, and why does it always come back? Well, some people believe that the ship was captained by a pirate who made a deal with the devil. The ship had been fired upon and was burning fast. He wanted his treasure hidden and protected, so he signed the pact and sealed his fate. Now he and his crew are doomed to sail forever on this perpetually burning ship. Yikes. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Peace Picture. I love this story. Honestly, I had no idea that it came from Korea either. When I worked as a camp counselor, I would tell this on night hikes all the time, and let me tell you, it really scared some campers. There are a few different versions with different main characters and different setup scenarios, but the meat and potatoes all pretty much stay the same. Alright, so the legend goes a little something like this. A middle schooler is biking home with his friends and they come to a forest path. Our main character lives through the woods and his pals take a different route home. So the group splits up and the young lad cycles through the trees. As he's going along, something catches his eye. There's a Polaroid picture lying face down at the foot of a tree. He pulls off the path, hops off his bike, and notices that there's a broken bicycle behind the tree. Picking up the photo, he sees a cute girl smiling at the camera, flashing the peace sign. You know the one. He really likes the picture, so he pockets it and heads home. That night, the boy feels an overwhelming urge to look out the window. When he does, he notices a young girl standing in his yard, facing away from him. He calls out to her, but she doesn't react. Feeling strange, he heads downstairs and walks into the yard, but the girl is nowhere to be seen. The next day, he shows his friends the picture and tells them the story of the girl in his yard, but none of them seem to recognize her. They go about their day at school, and then it's time to go home. On the ride home, the boy keeps an eye out for the girl about town, but doesn't see anyone resembling her. He and his friends make it to the woods again and split up. Distracted, the boy pedals his way through the flora and fauna. Suddenly, he catches a glimpse of someone behind a tree and cranes his neck to see if it could be her. Unfortunately, this causes him to lose his focus and crash. He doesn't survive. Weeks later, another kid is wandering through the woods. They see a Polaroid photograph lying in the decomposing leaves. Picking the picture up, they see a really cute girl holding up 3 fingers. Thinking it's a nice photo, they pocket it and head right along. Creepy, right? There are many variants, with car wrecks instead of bike crashes and grown men instead of school children, but the peace sign evolving into a 3 with another victim stays the same. Coming in at number 4, we've got virgin ghosts. It's every frat boy from the 80s worst nightmare, dying a virgin. Apparently this fear crosses cultures too. Known in Korea as the Cheoneo-guishin, they can be found all over the place. Folks say that you might run into a virgin ghost in abandoned buildings, hospitals, schools, bathrooms, cemeteries, and forests. So basically, anywhere you might have found a living virgin. They are characterized by their long dark hair that completely covers their face, and they're always wearing white clothing. Look behind that hair and you'll notice they look pretty bummed too. I suppose that comes with the title, huh? People say you'll know you're near one when the temperature drops suddenly and the wind changes direction. Chills are a common symptom too, but those kinda come with the previous 2. In Confucian Korean culture, it was a woman's role to serve her father, husband, and sons. If someone died before doing these things, she would be cursed to wander the earth forever. So if a woman was to die a virgin, she would become a Cheoneo-guishin. This comes with a fair deal of bitterness. Often, these ghosts will wander around the place where their former family lived, doing their best to cause problems for their good old relatives. Apparently erecting, pardon the pun, phallic statues could calm an angry virgin ghost down. This doesn't work, or if town council won't approve a long hard statue, you can always try to introduce the ghost to an equally single male. The male virgin ghost, or the Cheonggak-guishin, is always looking for someone to marry to put their soul to rest. So if you find one virgin ghost, you'd best get to work finding another. Coming in at number 3, we've got dreaming of dead family. You would think that seeing a dead family member might be nice. You know, maybe they're here to give you some advice or warn you of impending danger, or maybe they're just showing up because they miss you. Aww. However, there's a South Korean urban legend that says dreaming of a dead loved one is bad news. Do your best to resist their lovely charm, alright? It's said that if you dream of a dead family member or friend, they're going to try and steal your soul. They'll call you towards them, and if you head on down and give them a hug, it's game over. This is especially common near water, apparently. If these dreams persist, it's best to look into why they're happening. It's likely that whoever's calling out to you thinks that you owe them something, or you're holding on to one of their belongings. To figure out for sure, people advise heading out to wherever they're buried to pay respects. That should take care of the potentially soul-stealing dreams, and if not, well, I don't know what to tell you. Keep avoiding hugs, I guess. Coming in at number 2, we've got dog-human hybrids. Stories of people hearing disembodied voices while walking alone have been around pretty much forever, but this particular legend explains the mysterious phenomenon in a pretty creepy way. Around the 1970s, all sorts of folks started telling tall tales of finding truly disturbing creatures late at night. While strolling along, they hear a voice. They look up, they look down, they look left, they look right, and nobody's around, so they resume walking, but the voice calls out again. It's talking to them. A little paranoid now, the person checks behind them and looks to see if anyone is leaning out of a window or something. No dice. Then a little dog runs up to them. Oh, what a cute little dog, they think. But then it speaks, using language. And the person gets a good look at the 4-legged creature, and oh god, it's got a human face. Anyone with unsoiled trousers at that point is a champion. These chimeric abominations are apparently quite common in Japanese and Korean folklore. It's said that someone who lives a sinful life will end up reincarnated as a half-dog, half-human monstrosity. Like, it would be cool to live the carefree life of a dog, but definitely not with a human head and intelligence. But considering my sinful modern lifestyle, I'm destined to become a dog man. What's a good name for one of those? And finally at number 1, we've got sesame seeds. I know what you're thinking. Keegan, you must be losing it. Sesame seeds aren't an urban legend. They're an edible plant byproduct, delicious on bagels and breads. But you see, I know sesame seeds are real. But there are plenty of legends concerning them in Korea. Remember when I warned all the trypophobes to skedaddle? Well, this is why. There are a few different stories about the ill effects of sesame seeds. One concerns a young woman taking a rejuvenating sesame seed bath. She learns of a lovely new skin treatment where you pour sesame seeds into your bath water. Supposedly this does wonders, leaving you extra youthful and glowing with super clean pores. So the woman decides to give it a try. She fills the tub, tosses in the seeds, and steps into the bath. Her mother, knowing how excited her daughter was to try this treatment, begins to worry after she doesn't come out of the bathroom for an hour. She knocks on the door but gets no answer. Fearing the worst, the mother forces the door open and stumbles in. Her daughter's unconscious in the tub with sesame seeds stuck on all of her grotesquely open pores. The seeds have taken root in her skin. Oh, yuck. The alternate telling of this tale involves sesame seed skin cream with similar terrifying results. I suppose the pimple-popping crowd might find this fascinating, but for most folks, this is hideously upsetting. Usually the victim in this sesame seed disaster is able to have all the seeds removed, but it is a time-consuming and painful process. However, leave the seeds too long and you might end up as a human planter. Imagine the roots growing deeper and deeper into your flesh. It's kind of like that watermelon seed urban legend where if you swallow a seed, you'll grow one of the bulbous fruits in your stomach. Coming in at number 5, we've got water blades. While this may be a tale told around the world, it seems to have a strong presence in Italy. Sure, the name sounds cool, maybe even conjuring up some images of wicked aquatic swords, but the reality of water blades is horrific. In fact, if you really like water parks, you might want to skip this entry altogether. I don't want to just ruin them forever for you. We've all heard of razor blades and other assorted sharp objects showing up where they shouldn't. Halloween candy, playground equipment, door handles, and more. But those are all relatively controllable once you've realized the present danger. Water blades, on the other hand, will rip and tear until there's nothing left. The urban legend floating around implies that some folks have been fastening razor blades to parts of water slides at popular theme parks in Italy. You can imagine what might happen if someone went slip sliding down one of these horrible traps. Maim is an understatement in cases like these. Thankfully, this urban legend seems to be staunchly set in the false category. For something that purportedly happens quite often, reports of such activity are very rare. The actual affliction of rapidly descending individuals doesn't seem to happen. Still, the legend must be very effective, especially because it seems to get told so often. I suppose the lesson to be learned from this one is be careful using public facilities. Good advice, especially in these days and times. Coming in at number 4, we've got Pier Zanfretta's alien encounters. Everyone knows a friend of a friend who claims to have been abducted by aliens, and if not abducted, then maybe they saw a UFO or something. But this Italian security guard has a claim to fame so out there it might as well be in outer space. He says that he was abducted by aliens 5 times over the course of 3 years. All abductions happened in Genoa, all apparently while he was still working the night shift. Skeptics, as skeptics do, dismiss these claims, but apparently he's given details of each abduction while under the influence of truth serum. Pretty astronomical, don't you think? The very first abduction occurred late one night. Zanfretta was patrolling and saw what appeared to be 4 lights. After seeing this, the engine, lights, and radio went out in his patrol car. Thinking, as most security guards should, that there might be thieves about, he ran over to investigate. He did not discover a group of miscreants though. No, he found himself face to face with some extraterrestrial life. A UFO was floating above and he was abducted by these outer space dwelling individuals. While approaching the so-called scene of the crime, Zanfretta was grabbed from behind. When he turned around, he saw a creature he could only describe as an enormous, green, ugly, and frightful creature with undulating skin, as though he were very fat or dressed in a loose gray tunic, no less than 10 feet tall. This, of course, was only the beginning of Zanfretta's galactic incidents. He's run into interplanetary assailants again and again, sometimes even when he had backup. Following some encounters, special investigators were called in. They discovered distinct markings on the ground that didn't seem of human origin, but nobody but Zanfretta has laid eyes on the creatures themselves. His claims have intensified the belief of an alien presence near Genoa and has made a bit of a celebrity out of the now elderly security guard. His last abduction took place in 1980 while he was under close observation. These days, he claims that the aliens contact him directly, communicating with questionable unpredictable motivation. So if you're at all interested in close encounters with the third kind, Genoa might be the place to be. Coming in at number 3, we've got the Mazarol. Speaking of non-human entities, let's take a quick trip to the mountains. The Italian Dolomites, to be specific. No relation to the comedian turned movie star recently played by Eddie Murphy. This mountain range sits stoutly in northeastern Italy and is full of legends and secrets. Plenty of cryptids and creatures are said to roam these mysterious mountains, from fairies to wizards and witches to mythical royalty. But the creature that piques my interest the most is the Mazarol. In the valleys of Belluno province, this myth is still well known and widespread. This tiny, playful creature resembles a gnome, so make sure you tag your friends and let them know they've been gnomed. Woo! Now that I've made my requisite meme reference for the day, I can get to the actual details. This tiny, cap-wearing dude dressed in red wanders around the woods. For him to simply wander would be kind of boring though, so of course there's some darkness to this myth. He loves to find folks traveling around dusk and then lead them astray. Anyone who treads on top of his footprints is compelled by forces unknown to follow them all the way back to the no man's cave, after which they will forget everything about themselves. Many a tourist has fallen victim to the Mazarol's mean-spirited trickery. Some legends even say that the Mazarol will abduct the occasional individual and make them his slave. The story goes that the gnome managed to steal a young woman away from her village and put her to work. He was kind during this time and taught her many skills: cheese making, butter churning, and more. He even promised to teach her how to extract wax from whey. However, he was never able to complete this final task, as one day a hunter stumbled upon the missing girl and brought her back home. A remedy made from goat's milk brought her memory back, and the girl, overwhelmed with gratitude, taught the villagers how to make cheese and butter. To this day though, nobody has figured out how to extract wax from whey. Maybe someone will seek out the Mazarol and find out though. Coming in at number 2, we've got the Witches of Montematana. More mountainous mythical monsters are waiting for you. If you make your way out to Montematana, you will find world-class hiking and some unexpected extracurriculars. That's right, you can go witch hunting. Years ago, it was said that this mountain was a popular spot for witches to perform rituals and human sacrifices. They practiced their magics upon the crags and cliffs and amassed great fortunes. Reincarnations of these witches are said to return often in search of their material wealth from past lifetimes. The reality of this wealth is often called into question, but that doesn't stop treasure seekers from braving the range. Some of these booty seekers say they've encountered violent witches willing to slit their throats, but have somehow made it out alive. Maybe other proverbial pirates didn't make it out so well. Either way, Montematana is well known for magic, and you'd probably be best off if you just avoided making the perilous journey at night, unless you'd like to run into some witches, and in that case I'll reserve judgment. And finally, at number 1, we've got Poveglia Island. This tiny island about a half-mile from Venice has been shut off from the public for years. Some call it the Plague Island. Why? Well, I'll get to explaining. In the late 18th and early 19th centuries, this fortified island was used as a quarantine station. Over 160,000 infected folks were brought here to live out their last painful days away from the healthier portion of the population. Many mass graves have been discovered nearby over the years, proving how unfortunate anyone who paid Poveglia a visit really was. Napoleon stored weapons on this island as well, and when it was discovered, many small battles were waged. This, of course, added to the island's body count. Even later on, a mental hospital was built on the island. Legends say that one of the doctors in charge would treat his patients horribly, often torturing them and tossing them from the bell tower. With all these horrifying historic events taking place on the island, it's no wonder that folks think it's haunted. In fact, there's absolutely zero public access to this island. The folks in charge have deemed it too dangerous to visit. Venturing out to Poveglia is literally illegal. What could they be hiding out there? The wild and wicked history makes folks think that there might be something sinister waiting in the sandy shadows. Anyone else craving pizza all of a sudden? Maybe pasta and parm? Or am I the only one who gets hungry after talking about ghosts? Is that weird?
Coming in at 5, rats in the toilet. Urban legends about animals in sewers have been rife throughout history, with the most notable being the alligators and crocodiles in the sewers of New York, which for the most part actually turned out to be true. However, the thought of finding something in your toilet inches away from vulnerable areas of your body, well, that's something nobody wants to think about. While the alligators and crocodiles are far reach, this legend seems to have some elements of truth. A toilet drain is just wide enough for a rat to climb up, first and foremost, with the animals being attracted to sewage lines due to undigested food and feces. They follow the pipes and boom, wind up in your toilet bowl. Back in 1999, a woman in Virginia got a nasty fright when she went to the toilet and found a rat there waiting for her. Honestly, I've never feared a toilet before, but I certainly do now. Apparently this has happened enough times for public officials to put out a warning. If you encounter a rat in your toilet, close the lid and flush. Godspeed. Coming in at number 4, the Bunny Man. The Bunny Man is an urban legend that originated in Fairfax County, Virginia back in 1970. The legend has many variations, but for the most part involves a man wearing a rabbit costume who attacks people with an axe or hatchet. Most of the stories occur around Colchester Overpass, a southern railway overpass spanning Colchester Road near Clifton, Virginia, sometimes referred to as Bunny Man Bridge. In the tale, an escaped mental patient takes to gutting bunnies and hanging them from the bridge, but later escalated to the madman hanging teens in a similar manner. However, the legend is based out of reality. Following extensive research into the Bunny Man, the legend was linked to 2 cases of a man in rabbit costumes threatening people with an axe, with the vandalism reports occurring 10 days apart in 1970 in Burke, Virginia. The first incident occurred on the night of October 19, 1970 by US Air Force Academy cadet Robert Bennett and his fiancée, who were visiting relatives in Burke. While returning from a football game that evening, they reportedly parked their car in a field to visit an uncle who lived across the street. As they sat in the car, they noticed something moving outside the rear window. Moments later, the front passenger window smashed and there stood a figure in a bunny costume. As they drove away, the couple discovered a hatchet on the car floor. The second reported sighting occurred on the night of October 29, 1970, when construction security guard Paul Phillips approached a man standing on a porch of a home on Guinea Road. The man was wearing a white bunny costume and appeared to be around 20 years old. According to Paul, the man stated, I quote, "You are trespassing. If you come any closer, I'll chop off your head." Now, while neither incidents resulted in death or disembowelment, the thought of an adult in a bunny costume wielding a hatchet is absolutely terrifying. Coming in at number 3, we have Polybius. Polybius is an urban legend that emerged back in the early 2000s, with it concerning a supposedly fictitious arcade game called Polybius. The legend describes the game as part of a government-run crowdsourced psychology experiment which was based in Portland during 1981. According to the legend, the game apparently produced intense psychoactive and addictive effects in players, with the machines being said to have been periodically visited by men in black for the purpose of data mining the machines and analysing the effects. Now, while the entire legend doesn't quite hold up, there are some pieces that are actually based in fact. Brian Dunning, host of the Skeptoid podcast, did some digging and discovered that a 12-year-old named Brian Maurer had become sickened during a 28-hour marathon video game contest in Portland back in 1981. Just a few short days later, the Portland arcades were raided by federal agents who seized cabinets that were being used for gambling. Add these 2 events and add some fictitious elements and you have the legend of Polybius. Coming in at number 2, we have Candyman. The Candyman is an urban legend that tells the story of a murdered slave who returns from the dead in search of revenge if you say his name 5 times. In 1992, a Candyman movie was released based on the short story The Forbidden by Clive Barker. This in turn sparked 2 sequels, as well as a slew of paranormal games that friends dare each other to play. According to the urban legend, if you look into a mirror and chant the name Candyman 5 times, he will appear behind you and kill you with his hook. Now, although this is a legend and you will likely not invoke him by saying his name, there is some reality to the story. In the Candyman movie, after saying his name 5 times, Candyman breaks through the medicine cabinet in a bathroom in order to kill his victim. This part is factual, believe it or not. Back in 1987, the Chicago Reader published a story about Ruth McCoy, a woman living in a Chicago housing project who called 911 insisting she was being attacked. When responders arrived, they found her shot body, with investigators determining that her assailants had gained access to her unit by climbing through her medicine cabinet, which adjoins the apartments. The complex was supposedly built that way so that plumbers could attend to leaks by simply removing the cabinet to reach the pipes. However, this in turn resulted in people using this method to burgle and murder. Absolutely terrifying. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cropsey. Once upon a time, Cropsey was a mere urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York City. Cropsey was rumored to be a homicidal madman who had escaped from a mental institution and had a hook for a hand, who supposedly hunted children and dragged them back to the tunnel system under an abandoned hospital. Parents would often use Cropsey as a way to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home. The urban legend became so popular it inspired a 1981 slasher movie called The Burning, which very quickly became a cult classic. However, what was thought to be fiction quite quickly became reality. In the 1980s, Cropsey came to life in the form of a deranged killer who really did kidnap children. He was called Andre Rand. Rand was a janitor at the Willowbrook State School on Staten Island, which would eventually be closed in 1987 due to corporate punishment and rampant sexual abuse. In 1981, Holly Ann Hughes did not return home after going to the store to buy soap. Rand supposedly pulled up, pulling Holly into his car and driving away. Then again in 1983, 11-year-old Thais Jackson was reported missing after her mother had sent her to purchase food. She never returned. She was last seen exiting the Mariners Harbor Motel in Staten Island days after Rand had been released from prison. Then in 1987, Jennifer Schweiger was reported missing, and her body was later found underground after a 35-day search. Rand was ultimately convicted of the crime. A documentary about the madman was made entitled Cropsey, in which they speculate that Rand may have been involved with Satanism and provided the children to be sacrificed. Ultimately, Rand was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with eligibility for parole in 2037, at which time he'll be 93 years old.
Starting off this countdown, we have I Know What You Did Last Summer. The 1997 film starring Jennifer Love Hewitt, Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Freddie Prinze Jr., among others, is a classic slasher film. It surrounds 4 young friends who get stalked by a crazy killer with a hook. The film draws inspiration from the urban legend, The Hook, which has terrified kids for ages. The Hook or Hook Man is an urban legend about a killer with a hook for a hand that attacks couples in parked cars. Now, over the years, this urban legend has changed a number of times, but the main concept is that a couple go out to a place in the woods called Lover's Lane. While cuddling and doing other things, an announcement comes on the radio. It says a prisoner has escaped an asylum and is on the run. He is a known killer who they call the Hook Man because he lost his hand in an accident and replaced it with a hook. Just as this announcement finishes, they hear scraping on the side of the car. The girl is so freaked out that she begs her boyfriend to just drive them home, even though he thinks it's just nothing. Then they arrive home and they notice a bloody hook lodged into the side of their car. Of course, this is just an urban legend, but it may have some roots in real life, like the 1946 Texarkana Moonlight Murders. Basically a series of murders and attacks on young people parked on lovers' lanes in Texas. The killer has never been caught. People were afraid that these were done by the Hook Man, and that the legend came to life. But in reality, the Hook Man is just one big urban legend and won't come after you or your friends. In our 4th spot, we have Mothman. Chances are you have probably heard of this urban legend. The Mothman originates from West Virginia folklore. Apparently, the Mothman is a large 10-foot tall gray creature with red glowing eyes and wings. On November 15th, 1966, 2 young couples called the police to report this creature. They said that this large flying man was following their car while they were driving. During the next few days, more and more people reported similar things. The 2002 film The Mothman Prophecies is based off of the 1975 book by the same name. In the film, a reporter is investigating the legend of the Mothman, and it's based on the actual sightings of Mothman that I just discussed. I mean, there's no solid evidence proving that the Mothman is real, so for now, it's just an urban legend. But who knows? Maybe in the future we will learn about these creepy sightings and discover what or who was behind them. Coming in at number 3, we have the Candyman. The Candyman was an urban legend based off of a short story by Clive Barker, which eventually got turned into a movie. Basically, legend states that if you look in the mirror and chant his name 5 times, then you will summon him, and he will appear in the mirror. Similar to, Bloody Mary. The movie and legend scared many when they found out something similar happened to a woman. In 1987, a woman named Ruth McCoy was found dead after 2 men climbed through her medicine cabinet and shot her. The film was inspired by the method of killing and incorporated that into the film. In the film, you see the man with a hook appear through the medicine cabinet / mirror and try to slash people to death. Ruth's death had a lot of people scared. When Candyman featured the medicine cabinet scene in their film, it made them even more scared, making people think that, oh damn, killers can enter my house through the connecting wall and through the medicine cabinet. Not only that, but this whole thing had people believing that the Candyman was real. In our second spot, we have alligators in the sewers. The 1980 horror sci-fi movie Alligators in the Sewers is about a flushed away alligator that turns into this massive mutant gator. In the film, the gator gets flushed and ends up living in the sewers. From there, it eats the bodies of small animals. But these animals have been used for scientific experiments, and by eating them, it caused the gator to grow into this massive creature. Then it starts terrorizing the city. Of course, there is an urban legend very similar to the movie. It's probably what the movie was inspired by. Legend goes that a New York couple brought back baby alligators while vacationing in Florida. Eventually, they flushed these gators down the toilet, and the gators made a family of their own in the sewers under the city. Then legend goes that one time a boy was reaching for his baseball that rolled into the sewer grate, and an alligator bit off his arm. Now, let's look at the facts here. This legend and movie had people really believing that alligators could survive in sewers. But here's the thing. Alligators are cold-blooded animals, meaning they can't regulate their own body temperature. In order for them to survive, they need to warm their bodies by the hot sun or a heat lamp. And I mean, I don't think there are heat lamps down there in the sewers, okay? And there's definitely no exposure to sunlight. Without the warmth of the sun, the alligators would eventually die. Also, New York winters can be pretty harsh. They would end up just freezing to death down there. Now, if for some reason they did survive, the polluted water would certainly kill them off. They can't live long in Salmonella or E. coli, which is found in the sewage. And in our number one spot, we have The Dead Man's Curve. This 1998 film starring Matthew Lillard, who I love, is about two college students who discover that if their roommate takes his own life, then the college will bump up their grades out of sympathy. So they plan to kill their roommate and make it look like a Hate to break it to you, but I don't think colleges are allowed to do that. Either way, this movie gave birth to this urban legend. People really thought that a death could get them straight A's. Other versions of the legend say that the roommate doesn't have to commit suicide, but the school will grant them good grades if their roommate is murdered, or if they suffered from an illness and then they died as a result of that. Another variation says that the death must occur in the room or with the roommate. And a student who does not witness his roommate's death only receives a 3.4 average. Honestly, either way, it's just pretty messed up. But it had a lot of people thinking that it was real. Hate to break it to you, but it's not. So keep on studying and earn your grades that way.
In at number 5 we have Putchen. The Putchen hail from southern Chile and is a creature from Mapuche mythology and Choloto mythology. The Putchen is described as a shape-shifting creature highly feared that can instantly change into animal form wherever it so desires. Throughout different stories, it has often been described as a gigantic flying snake which produces strange whistling sounds, while its gaze could paralyze any victim it chooses, kind of like Medusa in that way, and permit it to suck its blood. In Chile, the word Putchen also designates to the common vampire bat, so some cryptozoologists believe that common vampire bat is the origin of the legend. However, some believe that the Putchen could be related to the chupacabra, something we'll be discussing later on. Spoiler alert. It is said that the only people who can defeat the Putchen are Mapuche medicine women. That was a mouthful. In at number 4 we have duendes. A duende, for those who don't know, is a creature from South America that originated from the phrase possessor of a house and was originally conceptualized as a mischievous spirit inhabiting a home. Now, duendes appear to pop up in many cultures around the world. In Portugal, the word is used to describe beings of a small stature wearing big hats, whistling a mystical song while walking in the forest. It is said that they lure young girls and boys to the forest, causing them to lose their way home. However, in Latin America this differs slightly. Duendes are believed to be the helpers of people who got lost in the forest so they could find their way home. They are also known to be gnome-like creatures who live inside the walls of homes, especially the bedroom walls of young children. As you can tell, the legend differs from region to region, some believing they are the souls of infants who died before they could be baptized. Others simply portray them as malevolent spirits that hide in homes and wreak havoc. Regardless of that, they are nasty little suckers who cause problems wherever they go. Coming in at number 3, El Chupacabra. Also known as the Chupacabra, this is a goat sucker sucker, a legendary creature that was first reported back in the mid-90s. The name itself comes from the animal's reported habit of attacking and drinking the blood of livestock, including goats. Now, there is actually said to be two kinds of chupacabra. One is a reptilian kind, the true chupacabra, and a canine kind, who are also called blue dogs. The first known sightings and attacks occurred back in March of 1995 in Puerto Rico. 8 sheep were found dead, each drained of blood. Investigators found 3 strange puncture wounds in the chest of the animal. A few months later in August, an eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, reported seeing the creature in the town of Canovanas, when as many as 150 farm animals and pets were reportedly killed by the creature. Jumping forward to 1975, similar killings in the town of Mocha were attributed to the vampire of Mocha. It was initially believed that these acts were committed by a satanic cult, but later more killings were reported around the island, and many farms reported loss of animal life. Each of the animals were reported to have had their body bled dry through a series of small incisions. Now, like I mentioned before, the most common description of the chupacabra is that of a reptile-like creature, said to have leathery or scaly greenish-grey skin, and sharp spines or quills running down its back. The other popular description is that of a strange breed of wild dog. It is described as being hairless and has a pronounced spinal ridge, unusually pronounced eye sockets, fangs, and even claws. In at number 2, La Llorona. Hailing from Hispanic folklore, La Llorona, which I'm pronouncing correctly now after you guys yelled at me in a previous video, is also known as the Wailing Woman or even the Crier. This is a legend about a woman who drowned her children in a lake and now mourns their deaths for eternity, roaming South America as a ghost or apparition. The story itself goes as follows. The woman was unloved by her husband, and one day she caught him with another woman. So as revenge, she drowned her sons in a river in grief and anger, and then drowned herself after she realized what she did. She was ultimately refused entry into heaven, for obvious reasons, unless she found the souls of her 2 sons. So now legend states that she roams the earth, hunting for the souls of her sons, with her cries and wails luring in innocent victims. La Llorona kidnaps wandering children at night, mistaking them for her own. Folks who have claimed to have seen her say that she appears at night or in the late evening by rivers or lakes, wearing a white gown with a veil, and some believe that if you hear the cries of La Llorona, you are marked for death. Now, one particular encounter went as follows. A boy and his family were sitting near a creek between Mora and Guadalajara in New Mexico when they saw the form of a tall, thin woman. She seemed to float over the water and end up the hill out of sight until returning a little later closer to them. The family had suspicions that she was La Llorona, so they went to the shore to see if there were footprints, and there were none. Creepy stuff. More interesting still, the earliest reference to La Llorona was actually in a sonnet written by Mexican poet Manuel Carpio in the late 1800s, where he identifies her as the ghost of a woman who was drowned by her husband. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have El Silbón. Hailing from Colombia as well as Venezuela, El Silbón, also known as the Whistler, is a legendary figure described as a lost soul. This tale originated in the 19th century, with the Whistler being described as the harbinger of death. According to the legend, a son kills his father. After he returns home to find his father attacking his mother. This angered the boy, resulting in him killing his father. Another version is a tad more disconcerting and states that the son was a spoiled brat, and on one afternoon he demanded that his father hunt for a deer, his favourite meal. However, when his father did not find any deer and instead returned empty-handed, his son killed him and cut out his heart, cooking them for dinner. Following this, a mother grabbed the boy's grandfather, who then tied the boy to a tree and unleashed a vicious dog on him. As this was happening, his mother put a curse on the boy, which ultimately condemned him to wander the plains as a ghost, carrying a sack of bones on his back. Some versions of the story state that these bones are of his father, while others state that these are the bones of his victims. Now, the Whistler is said to have a characteristic whistle that resembles the musical notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B in that order. It is said that when the whistling sounds close, there's no danger, but if the whistling is far away, it means the Whistler is nearby. Very confusing, I know. It is also stated that hearing the Whistler foretells one's own death, and in this situation the only thing that can save the victims is the sound of a barking dog. Many people from Venezuela have said that they have spotted the Whistler, primarily in the summer. However, it is mainly on rainy days that the Whistler wanders, hungry for death and eager to punish drunkards, womanizers, or even innocent victims. It is said that the Whistler will suck the alcohol out of drunkards through their navel when it finds them alone, and it tears womanizers to pieces, removes their bones, and puts them in the sack where it keeps the remains of its father. Lovely stuff. Coming in at number 5, we have the Night Marchers. The Huaka Ipo, also known as the Night Marchers, are murderous shades, demons, and revenants that haunt the islands. These undead spirits are the fighters, heroes, and warriors of ancient Hawaii, who are well known throughout the Hawaiian legends. These warriors are believed to be eternally fated to march the islands, seeking their next battle. They're most active at night, but also have been reported to be seen during the day. No structure deters their path, and as a result, they're often seen walking right through buildings. Some think that these restless souls are looking to reclaim rightful territory, replay a battle gone awry, or avenge their own deaths, while others say that night marchers are searching methodically for an entrance into the next world. Night marchers are said to roam through very specific locations and are often recognized by their raised torches and repeated chants, although there have been a few scattered reports of daytime marches. Moreover, the night marchers are thought to come out during periods of heavy wind, rain, and high surf, and fog or mist often accompanies them on their journey. It is also thought that the night marchers appear on certain nights designated by the moon, including Poakua, the 14th night of the new moon, and the nights of Kane, Ku, Lono, and Kanaloa. Although the night marchers allegedly float a few inches off the ground, some local accounts tell of seeing mysterious footprints in their path after they have passed. But where there was legend has it that resting your eyes upon the night marchers could signal a grim fate for the perpetrator, a friend or a relative, so witnesses are urged to crouch low to the ground, freeze, and don't look into their eyes. Any sound or movement could invite a night marcher's deadly glance. These night marchers are set diligently upon their destination and are not considered spirits that will deviate from their path to haunt humans nearby. Therefore, you must also be perfectly silent and still, for any sudden sound or movement could invite the deadly glance of a night marcher. If you make eye contact with the night marchers, you will die and be forced to march with them for an eternity. Coming in at number 4, we have Haunted Pei Highway. Pei Highway is known as a historic site and urban legend attached to it. The highway runs through the district of Nuuanu, a valley between the Ko'olau mountain range on leeward Oahu, and it was there that this decisive battle unfolded. Hundreds of warriors fought in the battle. Years later, during the initial development and what would eventually become the Pali Highway, more than 800 human remains were recovered. Some believe that the spirits of those warriors continue to haunt the area. Pali Highway is a staple of local urban legends and a popular spot for paranormal activity. People report coming back with photos of orbs or white mist or stories of supernatural encounters. One of the most common stories associated with the highway warns people not to take pork over the Pali. This is because it is known that if you try to bring pork across, your car will stop at some point along the journey and an old woman with a dog will appear. To continue on your way, you must feed the pork to the dog. While another story about the area describes 2 large stones at the start of the Pali Trail. These stones, according to the legends, were considered goddesses who took the form of these stone sentries to guard the Pali. Travelers would leave offerings in exchange for safe passage, and women would bury the umbilical cords of their newborns as protection from evil spirits. In at number 3, we have the Menehune. According to Hawaiian oral traditions, the Menehune were an ancient race of Polynesian people who inhabited the Hawaiian Islands before the first voyagers arrived. While there are no written accounts or skeletal remains of the Menehune, many Hawaiian legends reference them as mythical people of small stature and great strength. According to mythology, Menehune lived deep in the forests of Kauai and other Hawaiian islands. The Menehune are a mischievous group of small people who roamed the deep forests at night and are said to be about 2 feet tall, though some were as tiny as 6 inches, small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. They enjoy dancing, singing, and archery, and their favorite foods are bananas and fish. According to local legend, these small creatures are extremely industrious, master builders who are able to use their massive strength to accomplish great feats of construction and engineering in a matter of hours. The Menehune worked at night so ancient Hawaiians would not discover them. Their work would be abandoned if they were caught. Legend has it that the Menehune were capable of completing major projects in a single night, and they are credited with the construction of the Elikoko fish pond. Though referred to as the Menehune fish pond, archaeologists believe the site was constructed 1,000 years ago and that the stones used in its construction came from more than 25 miles away. If not credited to be built by the Menehune, its construction is a mystery. Another structure with mysterious Menehune ties on Kauai is the Kikeola irrigation ditch located in Waimea. While ancient Hawaiians are known for their stone-crafted irrigation systems for growing taro, the Menehune ditch is a fascinating archaeological find because of the type and cut of stone used to create it. Instead of uncut or roughly shaped lava rock, the Menehune ditch is constructed of finely carved basalt stones. In addition to their handiwork, the Menehune have been known to use magic arrows to pierce the heart of angry people people, igniting feelings of love instead. They also enjoyed cliff diving, and according to local law, they were smart, extremely strong, and excellent craftsmen, though because they worked at night, they were rarely seen by human eyes. Coming in at number 2, we have the Green Lady. By day, the Wahiawa Botanical Garden is a beautiful destination for those wanting to see lush tropical flora. Nearby, however, is home to a legend of a much more ghastly sight. If you decide to peer down into the nearby gulch at twilight, you may just see a glimpse of the local legendary Obake or Ghost, the Green Lady of Wahiawa. The story of the Green Lady takes place in the Wahiawa Botanical Garden, where one day while taking a shortcut through the nearby garden, the woman became separated from one of her children in the dense and dark forest. Unable to find her child, she lost her life of heartbreak and disappeared. Now she wanders the area and is said to snatch people that she finds playing in the garden and forest in an attempt to replace her own lost family. Reports of the Green Lady described her as a monstrous woman with green tinted skin. Her clothing and long black hair are covered in moss and seaweed, and her approach is heralded by the stench of the decaying plant matter that covers her. There have been sightings of a green woman in the forest, and the last known sighting was in the 1980s. People in Wahiawa sometimes dare each other to run across the bridge, as the story says that the Green Lady will come up on the bridge to take people away. The ghost has even been seen on the outskirts of Wahiawa Elementary School, which is located on the edge of the gulch. And finally, in at number 1, we have Pele's Curse. Moving towards one of the most known urban legends of Hawaii, we have Pele's Curse. Pele is known as the Hawaiian goddess of fire, lightning, wind, dance, and volcanoes. Her home is believed to be on the Halemaumau crater at the summit of the Kilauea volcano. Pele is often portrayed as a wanderer, and sightings of the familiar and popular goddess have been reported throughout the island chain for hundreds of years, but especially near volcanic craters and near the home of Kilauea, one of the most active volcanoes in the world. In these sightings, she appears as a very tall, beautiful young woman, or an unattractive and frail elderly woman, usually accompanied by a white dog. Those well versed in the legend say that Pele takes this form of an elderly beggar woman to test people, asking them if they have food or drink to share. Those who are generous and share with her are rewarded, while anyone who is greedy or unkind is punished with their homes or other valuables destroyed. She is known for her passion and temper, with many visitors reporting hearing stories of her power and destruction. The legend of Pele's Curse says that anyone who removes anything natively Hawaiian, like pieces of rock or sand from the Hawaiian Islands, will feel the wrath of Pele, who views the rocks as her children. Legend has it that if you take from Pele, you will incur years of bad luck. It is said that Pele's wrath is stimulated by jealousy or arrogance. Some believe the myth of Pele's Curse was actually invented by park rangers on the big island of Hawaii because they were tired of visitors making off with bits of the island. Many people, including local residents, believe that Pele's Curse is just a legend. However, to this day, hundreds of pieces of lava rock are mailed back to the big island as a result of those who claim they have experienced bad luck and misfortune due to the curse they received when stealing from the island.
Number 5, Red Rooms. I'm just gonna start this off by getting the obvious out of the way. This has nothing to do with the 50 Shades trilogy, so don't bother asking about that icky series that barely knows the truth about anything schmexy. Among the many illicit activities that take place on the dark web, one of the most disturbing is the existence of red rooms. So these rooms have gained a lot of attention and infamy, with many rumors and myths circulating about their existence and operation. While some people believe that red rooms are nothing more than urban legends, others claim to have witnessed them firsthand. So in fact, on Reddit, 4chan, and Hidden Wiki, a kind of, Cliff Notes for dark web beginners, you can find people trading second and third and fourth hand accounts of red rooms that have opened and closed. The concept of red rooms first apparently appeared on the dark web sometime in the early 2010s, and their name derives from the color of the room where the supposed acts take place. The term red room gained popularity after a Japanese animation featured a pop-up ad asking, "Do you like the red room?" And if users attempted to close the ad, a full-sized window would open with the names of individuals who had supposedly accessed the red room before and were found dead. The idea is that viewers pay to watch a live stream of a person being tormented and eventually killed, and they can even interact with the tormentor and other viewers through chat or messaging functions. Payments for these services are made in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin to ensure, anonymity. Despite the attention that red rooms have received, it's kind of challenging to determine whether they actually exist or not. But here's the thing, accessing them is not as difficult as one might expect. A simple Google search for redroom.onion, that link can yield results for these supposedly hidden pages. In addition, the technical limitations of the dark web make it almost impossible to stream live video, and payment analyses suggest that there are very few people actually paying for these services. Some people claim to have accessed them and seen the gruesome acts taking place, while others insist that they are nothing more than hoaxes designed to scare people. There have been no verified cases of people being killed in real time on the dark web. web, and many experts believe that the concept of red rooms is more of a fantasy than a reality. One reason why it's so challenging to verify the existence of these red rooms is because the dark web is notoriously difficult to navigate and monitor. It's impossible to search for specific websites on the dark web using traditional search engines like Google or Bing, and accessing dark web sites requires specialized software like Tor or I2P. Furthermore, many dark websites used encryption and other security measures to protect their users' identities and activities, making it pretty challenging to track or trace them. However, there have been some instances where law enforcement agencies have claimed to have shut down red rooms or arrested their operators. In 2015, the FBI arrested a man named Peter Scully in the Philippines who was accused of running a red room called Daisy's Destruction. The site was said to feature videos of Scully harming young people, and it was allegedly one of the most extreme examples of a red room ever discovered. Scully was eventually convinced of multiple crimes, including, young people sexual harm, human selling, and killing. Internet users continue to seek out the elusive and horrifying red rooms on sites like Reddit and 4chan, despite many claims that, it's nothing more than an urban legend. But let me know your take in the comments. Honestly, I believe they're out there, but I've also watched way too many crime shows for my own good. Number 4. What's for sale? I have wandered many an oddities market in my time, and heck, I've even performed an act at one that would make most people flinch. I've seen folks selling real and fake bones, demonic dolls, niche, schmexy fine leather goods, vintage clothes, tarot readings, banned books, World War II memorabilia, and oddities I can't even begin to describe. And heck, that's just the stuff like I can remember off the top of my head. So, what does the dark web have that I can't find in a niche marketplace? Oh, the no-no pills and powders. Sadly, I don't think I'm allowed to say the D word on here, so pardon me if things take a turn for the Looney Tunes way of speaking for safety's sake. I found plenty of tales on the interwebs about the crafty ways folks have been mailed their purchases. User OiRaves on Reddit is adamant that while he personally never received anything from any deep web affiliated sales folk, he did live with a roommate who would constantly receive the strangest brochures. At first, they received stuff for like cruise lines, which he wrote off as junk mail, but they came so frequently and started getting stranger, making him suspicious. For folks like me who might be wondering how pamphlets can get strange, apparently the mail ranged from, Christian Mingle brochures to petting zoo brochures, pretty much, any kind of pamphlet for any and all services one could think of. At the time, our narrator kind of felt like someone was gaslighting him, but he never said anything, and the brochures would disappear as quickly as they came, so he didn't really have time to stress it. That is until one fateful day when he walked into his apartment and his roommate was delicately cutting into a brochure to mull out a small baggie of powder. All I'm gonna say is that it definitely wasn't flour or icing sugar. Now, one time our narrator almost threw out a regular sized business envelope since after he opened it up, it looked similar to regular silly junk mail, until he noticed that the envelope had a hidden flap on the inside where there was, no things. Other transportation or delivery methods known to the dark webs include using a comic book that's still in the plastic sealing, but the entire back page directly inside the cover was a sheet of acid, or a CD in a case, once again, with the plastic sealed, and it looked totally ordinary until you peeled back the case artwork. In terms of how some folks get away with powders, pills, and other stuff, apparently the trick is to use collectible Pez dispensers already filled with pills that look like, they've never been opened. Funny story actually about white powder. One time I was doing a virtual script reading of the incredible movie Ready or Not, and had to mime using powder of my own, and I actually wound up inhaling way too much icing sugar up my nose, and oh my god, did it ever burn. Thankfully, I was off screen after it for a while, so I was able to recover in private, but it will be a permanent memory for the rest of my life. Number 3, hire a hitman. Alrighty, so this is where things get a little more into the legend part of today's video. One of the greatest myths about the dark web is that you can hire an assassin, with some folks saying that kind of service costs as little as, $5,000. Just a couple of months of rent. We all have that kind of money lying around, right? In this economy? Here's the thing, officially speaking, technically no dark web search records were ever found of an actual hit attempt or assassin operating there. Now, I'm not saying it's never happened, since I don't exactly have the time or expertise to go deep diving for a week, to try to find a legitimate person selling those types of services, but what was found by experts? So a network of dark web websites and individuals who accepted Bitcoin in exchange for absolutely nothing at all. I get using Bitcoin for secrecy and all, but trust me when I say you'll never catch me using it as a form of payment. If I ever start talking about cryptocurrency on social media, assume I've been hacked or kidnapped. Scammers out there are relying on the veil of mystery that the dark web has provided, whereas in reality, more injuries and killings happen through Craigslist and similar websites that are widely available on the surface web. It took me a moment to research that one, but yep, people have actually hired hitmen off of Craigslist for crimes. Granted, it never seems to end like they want it, so I wouldn't really recommend it. Also, leaving a digital trail is always a mistake if you want to do something naughty. Now, I'm not speaking from experience, just common sense. Number 2, Silk Road. Silk Road was an online black market and the first modern darknet market that was launched back in 2011 by its American founder, Ross Ulbricht, under the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. Hey look, I love a good reference to The Princess Bride, so that got me. The name Silk Road comes from a historical network of trade routes that were started during the Han Dynasty between Europe, India, China, and many other countries on the Afro-Eurasian landmass. 2 other individuals were also closely involved in the site's growth and success, known as Variety Jones and Smedley. In June of 2011, Gawker published an article about the site, which led to an increase in notoriety and website traffic. As part of the dark web, Silk Road operated as a hidden service on the Tor network, allowing users to buy and sell products and services between each other anonymously. To give you an idea of just how widespread it was, a former FBI special agent called it the Amazon of illicit substance sites. According to reliable sources, on Silk Road, you could buy no-no substances, illegal services, like hacking into private accounts, pirated content, fake passports, and more. All transactions were conducted with Bitcoin, which I guess it does help with protecting user identities, but yeesh. The website was known for its illegal substance marketplace, among other illegal and legal product listings. Between February of 2011 and July of 2013, the site facilitated sales amounting to around 9 million bitcoins. In May of 2013, Silk Road was taken down for a short period of time by a sustained DDoS attack. On June 23rd of 2013, it was first reported that the DEA seized 11.02 bitcoins, then worth a total of $814, which the media suspected was the result of a Silk Road honeypot sting. The FBI has claimed that the real IP address of the Silk Road server was found via data leaked directly from the site's CAPTCHA and was located in Iceland. IT security experts have doubted the FBI's claims because technical evidence suggests that no misconfiguration that could cause a specific leak was present at the time. But in October of 2013, the FBI shut down Silk Road and arrested Ross. Silk Road 2.0 came online the next month, run by former site administrators, but was shut down the following year as a part of Operation Onimus. Number 1, Mariana's Web. Already, not to be confused with Matt Webb, the fantastic guitarist from Mariana's Trench, one of my favorite bands, because goodness knows that could be an easy mistake. The legend of Mariana's Web appears to get its name from the deepest part of the ocean though, Mariana's Trench. It's apparently the deepest part of the dark web, a forbidden place of mysterious evil. Maybe. Depending on where you get your Mariana's Web myths, it's where you'll find the darkest secrets humanity has in its history. The secret location of Atlantis and the Vatican secret archives, or a database of archives belonging to the most powerful intelligence agencies on Earth. Now, if any of those titles sound familiar, I would recommend checking out some of the other content we put out here, since that's the type of stuff I like to talk about. But here's the thing. Mariana's Web is the definition of spooky BS, especially because it's technically impossible. It's supposedly only accessible through quantum computers, which really only exist in science fiction. This is once again where the legend part of today's title comes into play. But let me know in the comments if you think it exists, since honestly I wish it would. It would make my life a heck of a lot easier if I could hack into the Vatican archives and get the answers we all deserve. Number 5, Han's Trap. So for as long as there's been a jolly old Saint Nick providing gifts for well-behaved little ones, there has been somebody or something filling in the role of his counterpart, punishing the naughty ones. These fearsome figures range from the iconic horned Krampus, we all know Krampus, to Perta, the shape-shifting Christmas witch who fills folks' bellies with straw. So if you're misbehaving, ugh. Granted, I think the most terrifying one out of all of them is Han's Trap. It's the classic tale of a man selling his soul to become rich in the 15th century. Now, the legend of the Christmas Scarecrow is well known in the French regions of Alsace and Lorraine. His thirst for power was so great that he turned to deals with the devil to enhance said power and status. Hearing of this, the Pope himself excommunicated Trap, after which he was banished from Alsace? I couldn't really find a pronunciation, so let me know in the comments, and his wealth and lands confiscated. Lonely and mad, Trap lived out the rest of his days at a cabin high in the mountains, somewhere in, the region. There he continued to brood and his evil desires festered. He also developed a hankering to try the taste of human flesh. Finally, he became the dreaded Christmas Scarecrow. Adorned in straw as a disguise, he waited on lonely roads for a victim. And one day, a small boy came across the dwelling, and a hungry, unstable Trap cooked him for dinner. As fate would have it though, before he could dig in, Trap was struck by lightning, and that was the end of him. His story lives on in the form of a boogeyman-like tale that says he sometimes returns to civilization on Christmas, going door to door in search of another meal. So, check your peephole before you open your door on Christmas Eve, or any day. Number 4, Mary Lwyd. So this is the textbook definition of nightmare fuel, and I'm sorry for proving that here. However, the iconic holiday traditions, which is said to be derived from some sort of religious rite, possibly paganism, in the early 1800s simply could not be left off of today's list. So, the creature itself is a horse's skull that is decorated with ribbons and affixed to a pole. The back of the skull is attached with a white sheet, which drapes down to conceal both the pole and the individual carrying this device. So on occasion, the horse's head was represented by not a skull. Instead, it was made from wood or paper. And in some instances, the horse's jaw was able to open and close as a result of a string or a lever attached to it. And there are accounts of some pieces of glass being affixed into the eye sockets, to represent eyes. This custom was first recorded in 1800, with subsequent accounts of it being produced into the early 20th century. According to these, the Mari-Lud was a tradition performed at Christmas time by groups of men who would accompany the horse on its travels around local areas. Although the makeup of such groups varied, they typically included an individual to carry the horse, a leader, and individuals dressed as stock characters. The men would carry the figure to local houses where they would request entry through song. The householders would be expected to deny them entry, again through song, and the two sides would continue the responses to one another in this manner. If the householders eventually relented, the team would be permitted entry and given food and drink. Although the custom was given various names, it was best known as, Mari-Lud. The etymology of this term remains a subject of academic debate, by the way. The folklorist Ioreth C. Peat believed the term meant Holy Mary. It was as a reference to Mary, mother of Jesus, while the folklorist E. C. Cott thought it was more likely that the term had originally meant grey mare, referring to the head's, equine appearance. Several earlier folklorists who examined the topic, such as Pete and Ellen Ettlinger, believed the tradition had once been a pre-Christian religious rite, although scholarly support for this interpretation has declined amid a lack of supporting evidence. The absence of late medieval references to such practices and the geographic dispersal of the various British hooded animal traditions among them, the hooding of Kent, the Broad of Cotswolds, and the Old Ball, Old Top, and Old Horse of Northern England, have led to suggestions that they derive from the regionalized popularization of the 16th and 17th century fashion for hobby horses among the social elite. Although the tradition declined in the early to mid-20th century, partly due to opposition from some local Christian clergy and changing social conditions, it was revived in new forms in the mid to latter part of the century. The tradition has also inspired various artistic depictions, appearing for instance in the work of the painter Clive Hicks Jenkins and the poet Vernon Watkins. So if you encounter a horse skull on your doorstep, congratulations! Apparently you've got some good luck. Anybody got a spare horse skull? Number 3, the Yule Lads. Look, I hate to be the one to make the comparison, but when I first saw a photo of these little guys, they totally reminded me of the Seven Dwarfs from Snow White, which is one of my favorite Disney movies, so I couldn't understand how they're considered demonic. But I also think Annabelle's adorable and precious, so maybe my view on the world is a little bit warped. The 13 Yule Lads are mischievous winter spirits from Icelandic folklore, and over time they've become a friendlier presence and similar in appearance to Santa Claus. But they haven't always been that way. Once depicted as evil spirits and trolls, the Yule Lads originally represented the dark spirits of nature taking over as winter forced communities indoors and off the mountains. They are the 13 sons of Grilla, a young person eating ogress, symbolic of hunger and scarcity of food. Now the oldest poems about Grilla describe her as a parasitic beggar. She walks around asking parents to give her their disobedient offspring. Now her plans can be thwarted by giving her food or chasing her away. And originally she lived in a small cottage, but in later poems she appears to have been forced out of town and into a remote cave. Current-day Grilla can detect young people who are misbehaving year-round. She comes down from the mountains during Christmas time, though, to search for her meal. So she leaves her cave, hunts them down, and carries them home in her giant sack to devour as her favorite stew. Now, according to legend, there's never a shortage of food for her. According to folklore, Grilla has been married 3 times. Her third husband is said to be living with her in their cave in the, lava fields with the big black Yule cat and their sons. She supposedly has dozens of offspring with her previous husbands, but they're rarely mentioned nowadays. Right, back to the lads. So they're going to come down to the town and the farms, one by one, eventually covering the streets on Christmas Eve, which was when the spirits of winter had fully reclaimed the land. They would then retreat one by one as the days become longer and winter begins to run its course. There were previously as many as 82 Yule Lads, who were far more cruel and punishing. However, an 18th century royal decree about religious practice and domestic discipline banned parents from using horror stories and monsters to threaten their offspring. As such, the stories became much tamer, leading to the far more generous and only slightly naughty characters present today. In the mid-19th century, author John Arneson drew inspiration from the Brothers Grimm and began collecting folk tales, so his 1862 collection is the first mention of the names of the Yule Lads. So they visit on the 13 nights before Christmas, and every single time they make your life a little bit worse than it was before. Young people leave their shoes on the windowsill, and the Yule Lads can tell by the shoe whether they've been good or bad. Punishments include stealing your food, slamming all your doors, and stealing your candles. Now each Yule Lad has a different name and visits across, like I said, the 13 days leading up to Christmas. And yes, obviously I'm going to name all 13 guys. It's me. So Sheep Cote Claude harasses Sheep, but is impaired by his stiff peg legs and arrives first on December 12th. Gollygog hides in gullies, waiting for an opportunity to sneak into the cowshed and steal milk, and he arrives on December 13th. Stubby is abnormally short and steals pans to eat the crust left on them. Oh, and he arrives on December 14th. Spoonlicker is pretty straightforward. He steals and licks wooden spoons. He's extremely thin due to malnutrition, and I think I'm good with listing when these guys arrive. I'm sure you get the point by now. Pot Scraper simply, steals leftovers from pots, while Bowlicker hides under beds, waiting for someone to put down their askur, which is a type of bowl with a lid that was used instead of dishes, which he then steals. Door Slammer obviously likes to slam doors, especially during the night, waking people up. Skyr Gobbler has an affinity for skyr, which is apparently similar to yogurt. Next up, Sausage Swiper hides in the rafters and snatches sausages that are being smoked. Window Peeper is a snoop who looks through windows in search of things to steal. Doorway Sniffer has an abnormally large nose and an acute sense of smell, which he uses to locate leaf bread. Meat Hook, yeah, you guessed it, uses a hook to steal meat. And finally, Candle Stealer follows young people in order to steal their candles, which were once made of tallow and thus edible. Each of these lads stay for 13 nights, and that's 13 nights too many in my opinion. I need my sleep. Number 2, Kalikantsaros. So they're a malevolent creature in Southeast European and Anatolian folklore. Stories about the Kalikantsaros, or its equivalents, can typically be found in Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia, and Cyprus. These creatures are believed to dwell underground, but come to the surface during the 12 days of Christmas, from December 25th to January 6th. It is believed that while they're underground, they're sawing at the trunk of the tree that holds the earth, so it will collapse along with the earth. According to folklore, when the final part of the trunk is about to be sawed, Christmas dawns and the creatures are able to come to the surface. They forget the tree and come to bring trouble to mortals. Finally, on Epiphany, the sun starts moving again, and they must return underground to continue their sawing. They see that during their absence, the world tree has healed itself, so they must start working all over again. This is believed to occur annually. So these werewolf-like creatures tend to come out at night to cause trouble, play around, but after they've had their fill of the above-ground mischief, they go back down there. Rumor has it that leaving a colander on your doorstep is the best practice to ward them off, so excuse me, I gotta go through my kitchen. Number 1, Knecht Ruprecht. In the spirit of the season, I figured we could bookend today's list with Santa sidekicks. He's the most popular gift-bringing character in Germany after St. Nicholas, but is virtually unknown outside of the country. He first appears in written sources in the 17th century as a figure in a Nuremberg Christmas procession. Now, Knecht Ruprecht has been mentioned as a companion of St. Nicholas, but he would go from house to house and ask the young folks to pray. If they did, he would give them a treat, but if they didn't, he would give them useless trinkets, such as coal. The worst would come if they refused to even try to pray. He would thrash them with his bag of ashes that he liked to carry around, and it's even said that he would leave a switch for the parents to use during the year. In related folk traditions more closely associated with certain regions in the High Alps, particularly the snowy villages south and west of Salzburg in Austria, the Knecht Ruprecht character functions as St. Nicholas's assistant, rather than as a primary actor in the early December rituals, keeping a watchful eye on the benevolent saint during his journey. Both are, in turn, accompanied in these regions by an assortment of terrifying horned, goat-like creatures, you guessed it, Krampus, who seek out and terrorize misbehaving youths identified by St. Nicholas for punishment. The worst offenders are said to be thrashed with birch switches, and sometimes stuffed in a Hessian sack and thrown into an icy river for their bad deeds. I swear I was good this year, I promise.
Number 5 on this list is Stull's Gateway to Hell. Anything named Stull was just doomed from the start, guys. Thrillist says the tiny town of Stull has counted very few residents since it was founded in 1856. The most famous is rumored to be Lucifer himself, who some say appears at the town cemetery on Halloween and spring equinox. They say he uses the site where a roofless church once stood as a portal to and from hell. Some say that he's drawn to the site of frequent witch hangings. Others believe one of the graves actually contains Satan's own child. Either way, new graves continue to be dug despite signs warning against trespassers, perhaps referring directly to the Prince of Darkness himself or the cults that are rumored to flock to the grounds. The first published article about the horrors are traced back to a 1974 article in the University Daily Kansan, though whispers about evil have persisted since 1900 or so. In 1998, the hanging tree was torn down to stop people from visiting. It hasn't lessened the need for a small town to bolster an annual police presence to deter visitors looking for a glimpse of the devil himself. So we have witch hangings here, we have cults that flock here, and then we also have the worst thing of all, the literal devil potentially calling this place home. How could somebody decide to name a town Stull? That is way too close to the word skull and it's just destined for failure. People have been smart enough not to live here all that much, and as Thrillist has said, the residents are few and far between, but it doesn't change the fact that this place is deeply haunted. If the devil devil truly does live here and there is a portal to hell, then there's no telling what other crazy things can happen here. Maybe there are a few residents around because the devil has been taking them. I also think it's interesting that there are more police around this place. Why would there be a bunch of police around an area where there isn't that many people? Maybe the government knows something about this place that we don't. Maybe they're hiding something and don't want locals finding out. It's just a theory, but based on the rumors around this place, I could believe it. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Chair. I am perfectly happy with my lazy boy and don't need to be sitting on any type of devil's chair anytime soon. Insider says the legend of the Devil's Chair goes like this. An old farmer in Alma refused to sell his land to the city in order to build a new cemetery. Someone got a little too tired of waiting for him to sell, so he was pushed into his own well. Eventually, somebody said that there was a terrible smell coming from the well, so the city sent someone to investigate. It was ruled that the well was empty and it was boarded up. Now, if you make your way to Alma, you can actually sit on the boarded up well, but legend says that people who have sat on the well have been known to mysteriously disappear. Where the heck did my dude go? He was down there in the well and then just poof, he was gone. Like, did his body go underwater and just couldn't be seen, or was there something more paranormal afoot? Well, whatever happened to the body, I guess it doesn't matter too much now because there is certainly something paranormal happening here today. If you sit on this chair, you will literally go missing. Yeah, maybe let's stop sitting on the haunted well that people have named the Devil's Chair. Maybe, I don't know, let's put a fence around it, or better yet, let's just destroy the damn thing. Number 3 on this list is Sawyer Castle. Sawyer Castle is currently haunted by the ghosts of 2 lovers who left this world far too soon. Ranker says, this haunted Kansas mansion has many gruesome tales attached to it, but certainly the most awful one involves the tragic suicides committed by a husband and wife during the Civil War. The owner of the house had gone to fight and instructed his wife to wait for the arrival of a particular ferry that he would be coming home on. When her husband did not return on that ferry, she assumed him dead and hung herself in the bell tower. However, he was in fact still alive, and upon his arriving home, he found his wife dead and killed himself out of misery. It's said that strange lights and noises emanate from the house's bell tower to this day. This story is very similar to that of a classic play, Romeo and Juliet. 2 lovers, held apart by something out of their control, take their own life in what is a clear miscommunication. Even though this was horrible, I suppose that they sort of got what they wanted. Now they're together forever, but just in ghost form. Of course, they can't just let this lie though and have to haunt this place and ruin everyone else's life who's still living here. Maybe they think that because they're still together and technically still around, that they should own the home, and anyone in it that's not them is a trespasser. Whatever it is that they think, they make it very difficult for those who go around here. I'd avoid this place altogether if I was you. Number 2 on this list is Fort Leavenworth. What happened here back in the day is enough to make anyone's hair raise. Ranker says Fort Leavenworth is considered to be one of the most haunted army bases in the US, and it's home to a number of helpful and malignant spirits. It has seen centuries of war and is home to a military prison called the United States Disciplinary Barracks. During World War II, there was a prisoner uprising, and as punishment for their unruliness, one prisoner was hung every hour for 14 hours. They quickly ran out of space in the gallows and also used one of the elevator shafts in the administration building to hang people. Ever since then, screams have been heard from that same elevator shaft at odd hours. Not surprisingly, nearly every building on the base has a horrifying story attached to it. I know that it was war and they were trying to have an uprising, but my gosh, hanging one person an hour? Like, that is just so brutal. No wonder this place is deeply haunted now. All of the spirits from back then are locked into this place and refuse to let go. And you better believe that they make the people who are still around pay for what happened in the past. People have reportedly been attacked by invisible spirits before. They've been clawed at and bitten, and one person even had their finger ripped right off of their body. Things are not pleasant at this army base, and I'm kind of surprised that it hasn't been razed to the ground yet. Might be the only thing left to do to quiet these spirits down. And finally, number 1 on this list is the ghost of Saline River. You already know that this is going to be a scary legend when they have a name like that. Ranker says, according to legend, a Native American ghost by the name of Takaluma is said to walk the banks of the Saline River and was first spotted by a cowboy in the winter of 1879. Takaluma's spirit was condemned to wander the river until he found the skull of his dead father, who had been murdered by white men in the 1840s. The ghost rose from his burial mound and warned that far more powerful spirits might join in the search, but the skull has still never been found. What a horrible fate. Your father gets murdered and then you have to spend the rest of your existence as a ghost wandering around this river searching for his skull. This ghost was once a calm presence, but time has made Takaluma angry. Now it's said that this ghost will drag unsuspecting victims into the river and drown them, then take their skull and see if he can convince the other spirits that it's his father's. This has never worked before, but when you have a literal eternity, I suppose you'll try anything. A beautiful river to look at from a distance, but not one that you want to get too close to.
In at number 5, the Sally House, Atchison, Kansas. Built in the mid-1800s in Atchison, Kansas, the Sally House is believed to be haunted by a little girl named Sally, who died in the home during an appendicitis surgery. However, it was in the mid-1990s that Sally's story began to receive both local and national attention, when the owners at the time, Tony and Deborah Pickman, began noticing strange occurrences in the home, including attacks on Tony, unexplained voices, and burnt finger marks. After investigations were conducted by the Kansas Paranormal Group, it was discovered that Sally wasn't the only ghost haunting the house, but there was also a middle-aged woman. However, one paranormal believer has an explanation for the second ghost. They believe that this is in fact Sally's mother, who died not long after Sally passed away. She had attacked the doctor and died, with the spirits remaining in the home. The mother is said to still be grieving the loss of her child and is the one who is said to attack visitors. However, Sally is said to be a happy ghost and tries to play with children that move in the house. Other paranormal experiences in the house include pictures being turned upside down, floating objects, disembodied voices, apparitions, toys being thrown around, and doors opening, closing, locking, and unlocking. The house is now standing vacant with nobody wanting to live in the home. However, the house offers self-guided tours in September and October, as well as guided day tours and special overnight visits. In at number 4, the Myrtles Plantation, St. Francisville, Louisiana. The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana. Built back in 1796 by General David Bradford, the plantation is reported to be one of America's most haunted homes. The plantation house is rumored to be on top of an ancient Indian burial ground, with it currently being a bed and breakfast and offering historical and mystery tours for ghost hunters. The plantation is said to be home to at least 12 different ghosts, with it often being reported that 10 murders occurred in the home. However, historical records only indicate the murder of William Winter. William Drew Winter was an attorney who lived in the plantation from 1865 until 1871, until he was shot by a stranger. After being shot, it is said that he staggered inside the house and died trying to climb the stairs. He died on the 17th step, and to this day, visitors as well as employees still hear his dying footsteps. Jumping ahead to 2002, Unsolved Mysteries filmed a segment at the plantation, and according to host Robert Stack, the production crew experienced technical difficulties during the production. It was also featured on the TV series Ghost Adventures, as well as on the series Most Terrifying Places in America. In at number 3, House of Death, New York. On 14th West 10th Street in Greenwich Village in New York stands a picturesque home, which is now known as the House of Death, with it having a less than cute history. Since its construction back in the 1850s near the start of the Civil War, 22 people have reported to have died in the home, and according to the New York Post, some of their spirits have never left. Some residents over the years have reported sightings of Samuel Clemens, aka Mark Twain, who lived in the building between 1900 and 1901. Sightings of the author have been reported on the first floor of the home near the staircase, with him said to be wearing a white suit. Allegedly, the spirit stated, "My name is Clemens and I has a problem here, I gotta settle." A few years later, after the sighting, the house was converted into a 10-unit apartment building. However, the hauntings did not cease. According to the New York Post, actress Jan Bryant Bartell and her husband moved into the apartment on the top floor in 1957 and immediately felt a monstrous moving shadow that loomed up behind her. After she left the home, she published a memoir where she wrote about feeling a brush against the back of her neck and smelling a rotting odor throughout the apartment. She went on to state that on one particular occasion she saw a vision of a man and she reached out to him. She stated that she touched a substance without substance, chilly damp, diaphanous as March mist or a cloud of ether. Coming in at number 2, Lalaurie Mansion, New Orleans, Louisiana. Located on 1140 Royal Street in New Orleans is the Lalaurie Mansion, a home which was reported to be one of the most haunted places in the world. Some may also be familiar with this house as it was depicted on American Horror Story Coven. Now, this home is where slaves were tortured at the hands of Delphine Lalaurie. Born Marie Delphine McCarty, but more commonly known as Madame Lalaurie, she was a New Orleans socialite and serial killer who, like I said, said tortured and murdered slaves in her home. Accounts of Lalla Reed's treatments of slaves between the years of 1831 to 1834 are mixed. However, Harriet Martineau, writing in 1838, claimed that enslaved people kept by Lalla Reed were observed to be singularly haggard and wretched. However, in public appearances, Lalla Reed was seen to be generally polite to them. Now, everything changed when a fire broke out in the home on April 10, 1834, which began in the kitchen. When the police were called and the fire marshals arrived, they found the cook chained to the stove by her ankle, with her later stating that she had started the fire as an attempt to end her life. As reported in the New Orleans Bee of April 11, 1834, bystanders responding to the fire attempted to enter the quarters of the enslaved people to ensure that everyone had been evacuated. Upon being refused the keys by the Lalla Reeds, the bystanders broke down the doors to the quarters and found, I quote, 7 slaves, more or less horribly mutilated, suspended by their neck with their limbs apparently stretched. When the discovery was made and the news broke out, a mob of local citizens attacked the Lalla Reeds' residence and demolished and destroyed everything upon which they could lay their hands. Now, the original mansion occupied by Lalla Reed did not survive, with the mansion on the corner of Royal Street, which is commonly referred to as the Lalla Reed Mansion, not being the same building inhabited by Lalla Reed. Despite that, many believe that the ground itself is still haunted. And finally, coming in at number 1, Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, Massachusetts. First and foremost, Lizzie Borden was an American woman who was the primary suspect in the 1892 axe murders, which took place at the home in Fall River, Massachusetts. The victims were Lizzie's father and her stepmother, with her being ultimately acquitted of the murders. Now, this case received a huge amount of attention across the United States, and following her release from jail where she had been held during the trial, Lizzie opted to remain in the same area where the deaths occurred, despite facing ostracism from other residents. Lizzie ultimately spent the remainder of her life in Fall River before passing away of pneumonia at the age of 66. The Lizzie Borden house is of course the home where the Borden family lived, with it being located on 230 2nd Street in the city of Fall River. From 1874 to 1892, the house was the property of Andrew Borden, Lizzie's father, who was a member of Fall River High Society. After Lizzie's trial and ultimate acquittal, she bought another home located on 7 French Street that she named Maplecroft. This is where she remained until her death. Now, as of today, the Borden house operates as a bed and breakfast, and it has been doing so since 1996. It is currently owned by Martha McGinn, whose grandparents purchased the home back in 1948. According to Martha, the room where Lizzie's stepmother was found murdered is the most requested room of the bedrooms at the B&B, which is incredibly sick and twisted. Coming in at number 5 we have the ghost of Stowe Lake. The history of Stowe Lake, located in the Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, is shrouded in mystery. Stowe Lake is said to be haunted by the spirit of a woman who, after attempting to save her child who fell in the water, drowned in the lake. Now, legend goes that this woman, referred to as the White Lady, so always the White Lady, wanders the edges of Stowe Lake as she searches for her baby. It is said that she can even be summoned by visitors, with the most active area surrounding the lake being near the Pioneer Women and Children statue. The legend states that the statue, depicting a woman with children, houses the spirit that haunts Stowe Lake. People have noted that at night the statue seems to have 3 children surrounding her instead of 2 older ones and one that is barely a toddler. Anyone wishing to summon the White Lady can do so by calling out, White Lady, I have your baby, 3 times, which seems very cruel if you ask me. Now, if she believes you, the woman will appear before you and will ask for her baby back. However, for doing this, the woman will haunt you for the rest of your life. However, if you tell the woman you don't have her baby, legend says she will drag you into Stowe Lake and give you the same death she suffered. It is also noted that the White Lady of Stowe Lake is not the only ghost to be found residing in San Francisco, of course, and if you wish to explore the creepy haunted history, you can do so with Haunted San Fran Ghost Tour. Coming in at number 4, we have the Dark Watchers. The Dark Watchers is a name given to a group of entities in California folklore purportedly seen observing travelers along the Santa Lucia Mountains. The Dark Watchers are said to be tall, sometimes giant-sized featureless dark silhouettes often adorned with brimmed hats or walking sticks. They are phantoms that are said to lurk inside the Erie Mountains. Legend has it that the Dark Watchers have claimed to be seen staring out at the vast space below the mountains before completely vanishing. Now, this legend may be attributed to the Chumash people who historically inhabited the central and southern coastal regions of California, with the ghostly figures first appearing in their Indian history and lore. The cave walls were donned with drawings drawings by the Chumash that depicted these phantoms. John Steinbeck also went on to write about the Dark Watchers in his story Flight, where the creatures were described as dark forms against the sky. I quote, "Pepe looked suspiciously back every time or so, and his eyes sought the tops of the ridges ahead. Once on a white barren spur he saw a black figure for a moment, but he looked quickly away, for it was one of the Dark Watchers. No one knew who the Watchers were, nor where they lived, but it was better to ignore them and never to show interest in them. They did not bother one who stayed on the trail and minded his own business." Steinbeck's son, Thomas Steinbeck, would also grow up to report having seen the Dark Watchers during his childhood, and later, along with artist Benjamin Brode, collaborated on a book titled In Search of the Dark Watchers, where they go into the history of the legend and interview locals who claim to have seen them, such as the famed Big Sur resident Billy Post. In more recent history, sightings occurred in the 1960s by a Monterey High School principal. Coming in at number 3, the monster of Elizabeth Lake. Now, I should preface this point by saying that there are at least 10 different Elizabeth Lakes in California, but the one we're talking about today is in LA County near Palmdale, and is perhaps the oldest one in the state. Now, it is said that Elizabeth Lake was created by the devil himself for the keeping of his hellish pets. The legend also goes on to state that if you swim deep enough, you will stumble across the passageway to hell. Throughout the years, there have been countless sightings of a monster that is said to have the neck of a giraffe, head of a bulldog, bat wings, and is said to be 50 feet long with a rancid scent of decay. For over a century, sightings have been reported and strike fear into the locals' hearts. It is said that locals have been so scared that landowners would actually sell or completely abandon their properties. Not to mention, any attempt to build on the lake's land has come to no avail. At night, residents could hear screams from the lake and would have horribly disturbing visions. Farm animals would also disappear, and sightings of flying, winged creatures were also reported. However, like all urban legends, any proof of creatures' existence or death is yet to be discovered. Coming in at number 2, we have Turnbull Canyon hauntings. Turnbull Canyon is a 4-mile loop located near Whittier, California, and is part of Puente Hills Preserve. Turnbull is known for the view it provides of the Heisler Temple and Rose Hills Memorial Park. However, it has also been the source of rumors regarding paranormal activities. Death is said to reside within the canyon, with the place itself once being referred to as Hutuknan, which means the place of the devil. The legend tells of the region being haunted by the Indians who were murdered for not converting to Catholicism. Their spirits are now said to linger in unrest in the canyon. Years later, Turnbull would also be the site of numerous satanic rituals held by cults attempting to conjure demons or even Satan himself, often by sacrificing children from the nearby orphanages. However, one day, one of the sinister cults suddenly vanished, and what was left behind in their wake were paranormal sightings and occurrences being reported by hikers and locals, who have also claimed to have seen hooded figures, hellish creatures, and mutilated children. Not to mention, more mysterious deaths have since occurred, with one teenager being electrocuted while exploring the ruins by an old asylum in the canyon. A plane also crashed there in 1978, taking the lives of 29 people. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Hollywood Sign Spirit. Probably one of the most infamous legends to come out of California is the Hollywood Sign Spirit, which is said to be haunted by early 1900s actress Peg Entwistle. Entwistle was a British stage and screen actress who began her career back in 1925, appearing in several Broadway productions. By 1932, during the height of the Great Depression, Entwistle was in Los Angeles with a role in the Romney Brent play The Mad Hope, starring Billy Berg. Following that, Entwistle found her first and only credited film role for radio pictures called 13 Women. However, on September 18, 1932, a woman was hiking below the Hollywood sign when she found a woman's shoe, purse, and jacket. She opened the purse and found a suicide note, after which she looked down the mountain and saw the body below. Entwistle's body remained unidentified until her uncle, with whom she had been living with, identified her remains. The suicide note was eventually published and read as follows: "I am afraid. I am a coward. I am sorry for everything. If I had done this a long time ago, it would have saved a lot of pain. P.E. Nowadays, Entwistle is referred to as the Lady in White, who is said to appear to people hiking to the off-limits part of the sign, where she killed herself. However, as opposed to appearing as the beautiful actress she was, she is often seen with a skeletal face and deep hollowed-out eyes. It is also said that if hikers are alone, the Lady in White will influence them to also plummet off the Hollywood sign." Coming in at number 5, the Dog Boy. Hailing from Arkansas, the legend of the Dog Boy is one of the most infamous around the state. In 1954, Gerald Floyd Best Bettis, born to parents Floyd and Eileen Bettis in the Bettis house. During his early years, locals would say that the boy would catch dogs and cats and keep them in his home. However, what he was doing with these animals was absolutely horrific. However, what he was known for was the treatment of his parents. It was said that he imprisoned them in the attic, keeping them in there for years. According to reports, he abused them, but he wasn't arrested for it until after the death of his father and the continued abuse of his mother. He ultimately died in prison of an overdose, but since then people have claimed that paranormal goings-on have occurred at the former home. Flickering lights, strange noises, and moving objects have all been reported over the years. In some versions of the legend, his ghost walks on all fours and is shaggy like a dog, while in other versions he appears as a towering man donning a brown jacket and a bow tie. Coming in at number 4, we have Dudleytown. Dudleytown is an abandoned settlement in Connecticut in the United States, more commonly referred to today as Ghost Town. Since the mid-1920s, the land occupied by the village has been maintained. However, due to vandalism and trespassers, the site is no longer open to the public. Now, some history before we get into the nitty-gritty of this legend. Dudleytown was never an actual town. The name was actually given to the portion of Cornwall that included several members of the Dudley family. A local rumor has since circulated online that alleges that the founders of Dudleytown were descended from Edmund Dudley, an English nobleman who was beheaded for treason during the reign of Henry VIII. From that moment on, the Dudley family was placed under a curse which followed them to America. This curse is what was ultimately blamed for instances of crop failures and mental illness in the village. On top of that, Dudleytown visitors also report seeing paranormal phenomena such as an unnerving lack of wildlife, floating orbs of light, and sinister wolf-like black shadows. Not only that, but there is also said to be a mysterious group in the area called the Dark Forest Association that is said to police the grounds with militant force. What exactly is going on in Dudleytown? I don't really want to know. Coming in at number 3, we have the Alaska Triangle. Sometimes referred to as Alaska's Bermuda Triangle, this is a place in the untouched wilderness where people have reportedly been disappearing for years now. The triangle itself connects Anchorage, where I used to live, in the south to Juneau in the southeast panhandle, to Barrow, the northernmost town in Alaska. The area in between those points is unforgiving and a place not for the faint-hearted or inexperienced. Now, the area itself began to attract attention back in the 1970s, when a small plane carrying US House Majority Leader Hale Boggs, Alaska Congressman Nick Begich, and an aide Russell Brown vanished into thin air while flying from Anchorage to Juneau. For a month after the initial disappearance, planes, military aircraft, and dozens of boats scoured the area searching for the plane. However, nothing was ever discovered. No debris, no wreckage, nothing. Following the disappearance, more and more planes began to disappear, and on top of that, hikers also began to vanish into thin air. Since 1988, it is said that more than 16,000 people have disappeared in the Alaska Triangle, which is more than twice the national average. Now, whether this is something supernatural, extraterrestrial, or simply cruel weather conditions and harsh wilderness, we don't know. However, the disappearances have been blamed on everything from aliens to energy vortexes to shape-shifting demons. However, the likely explanation is the wilderness itself. It can be truly unforgiving, and Alaska is big, most of it is untouched wilderness. Lots of bears to eat ya. Coming in at number 2, we have the Alice killings. To this very day, the Alice killings remain one of the most bizarre and unsolvable serial killings in Japan's history. Between the years of 1999 to 2005, a series of killings supposedly took place. Killings that were completely different and unrelated except for one common element, a calling card that the killer left behind each time. He would leave behind a playing card, which varied from killing to killing. It would be left at each scene in an obvious location, and on the card would read Alice, written in the victim's blood. According to the legend, the first victim of Alice killings was Sasaki Megumi. She was a 29-year-old restaurant owner who one day decided to walk home from a friend's house, seeing as she lived only a block away. Several people offered her a ride home, but she refused. She was seen leaving the party in the early hours of the morning. However, the next time she would be seen, she wouldn't be alive. The next morning, a couple walking in the woods discovered her body. She was supposedly torn apart, with the couple instantly calling the police. Inside the mouth of Megumi was a playing card, the Jack of Spades, which had the word Alice written on it. At the scene there was absolutely no prints discovered, only vomit, which the woman from the couple admitted was hers. The next victim was said to be Yamane Akio. He was a known singer in a band who was abducted from his apartment on February 11, 2001. His bandmates were the last to see him alive, with a missing persons report being filed within days. On the home security footage, a hooded figure was seen entering through a side door and leaving with a large garbage bag that bulged strangely. The person in the recording was never found or identified, but it is believed to be the same killer because, like last time, at the scene of the crime an Alice card was discovered, a king of diamonds clutched in his hands. However, in a bizarre turn of events, in 2005, a Spanish serial killer was jailed for the murder of 6 people, and it was said that he would leave playing cards on the corpses of each victim as well. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Cropsey. Now, this legend is incredibly bizarre because it ultimately turned out to be true, and there is nothing scarier than a true urban legend. Cropsey began as an urban legend, the boogeyman of Staten Island in New York City. It was rumored that this was a homicidal madman, a person who had escaped from a mental hospital who had a hook for a hand. He was said to hunt down children, drag them back to his tunnel system which lay under an abandoned hospital, and then kill them. Parents would use Cropsey to frighten their children into being good and staying close to home. He could be anywhere, so you better behave. However, parents didn't think too much of it because after all, Cropsey was just a mere legend, right? The legend continued to spiral, with the story even being turned into a movie in the 1980s called The Burning, which follows a man named George Cropsey who goes insane after a prank leaves him horribly disfigured. However, things went from bad to worse in Staten Island when Cropsey became a reality. The boogeyman came to life in the form of Andre Rand, a homicidal madman. Rand worked as a janitor at the Willowbrook School on Staten Island, a place which was said to be horrifically cruel to its students. The school was built as a respite for children with disabilities. However, after it was revealed to be a living hell, it would close its doors in 1987. After its closure, janitor Andre Rand would continue living on the grounds and was suspected of kidnapping several children. However, despite this never being proven to be true, he was found guilty of the crime, specifically one kidnapping in 1988 and one again in 2004. The legend became so infamous across the state that a movie was made about the story and Andre Rand, simply called Cropsey. In at number 5, we have the Beast of Hackney Marshes. This legend dates back to 1981 when 4 kids were crossing the marshes on a winter's morning. It is said that they happened upon, I quote, a giant, great, growling, hairy thing. Naturally, people began to assume that this was some kind of hideous monster. It remained a legend going forward, but wasn't spotted again until 2012 when it was captured on camera. Helen Murray, a university student, was out for a stroll near the dense woodland area when she said she was stopped in her tracks by an unknown animal, which she stated was larger than a person and covered in shaggy black fur. I quote, I tried to stay calm as I wasn't sure what kind of animal it was or if it was even alive. I had my phone ready to call 999, then the creature moved. Somehow I managed to take a couple of pictures before I ran. I managed to get away but was scared half to death. Now, she didn't contact the police because she feared they wouldn't believe her. However, the story certainly revived memories of the unexplained sighting that occurred in 81. Officers have stated that they believe neither of these sightings were hoaxes and that 2 bear carcasses had previously been found nearby in the River Lee, and to this day it remains a mystery how they even got there. So, were the bears killed by this creature? Were the bears the creature? We don't have bears in England, so... stumped. In at number 4, the Killer Pool in Epping Forest. Epping Forest is a 2,400 hectare area of ancient woodland between Epping in Essex and Forest Gate in Greater London. Over 100 lakes and ponds are found in the forest. However, there is only one that is referred to as the Killer or Suicide Pool. This legend grew rapidly in popularity after Irish author Elliot O'Donnell wrote about it in his book Haunted Britain, stating that there is a pool in Epping Forest that is home to unearthly presences, some miserable and some evil. Now, there is one story about the pool that goes as follows. Around 300 years ago, a couple engaged in a forbidden relationship, meeting secretly at the pond in the forest. However, the girl's father found out about the relationship and in a fit of anger he killed her at the pool. After learning about his girlfriend's death, the lover committed suicide at the very same spot. Following these tragic events, no birds were heard and no animals were ever seen in that area again. The water also became dank. and not dank in a good way. Bad dank. On top of that, it is said that people with no inclination went on to commit suicide there, including a woman in 1887 and a young servant, Emma Morgan, who killed herself and her child. Jumping forward to 1959, a competition in a magazine was held to find the exact location of the pool. One writer claimed to know but refused to reveal the details, stating that the place was evil beyond measure. I quote, "The suicide pool is deep in the heart of the forest, far from any road. It is dank, evil and malignant, with an atmosphere unpleasant beyond description. I doubt if the sunshine ever penetrates through the surrounding trees. If it did, it would never lighten the black waters." In at number 3 we have the Ghost of the Grey Lady and Longleat House. Longleat House is an English stately home and the seat of the Marquis of Bath. The house was originally built by Sir John Tyne and was designed mainly by Robert Smithson after Longleat Priory was destroyed by fire in 1567. It took almost 12 years to complete and is often regarded as one of the finest examples of Elizabethan architecture in Britain. Sounds magical, right? Well, it has a dark side, one of deceit and murder. It all began back in 1733 when Lady Louisa married Viscount Weymouth, who owned the Longleat estate. Louisa moved into the home with him, bringing with her a number of her own servants. It was said that she was fond of one of her footmen, who she described as loyal and true. Now, this favoritism wasn't taken well among the other servants, and out of jealousy they told Viscount Weymouth that the footman was having an affair with Louisa, which of course wasn't true. Now, this is where the story gets a little blurry. Some say Weymouth paid someone to push the footman down the stairs, while others say he did it himself. Either way, the footman broke his neck and his body was buried in the cellar. This took a toll on Lady Louisa, who developed pneumonia, which resulted in her death at the young age of 22. According to visitors of Longleat House, you can find a lady dressed in grey creeping along the house's corridors, especially close to the library where the footman died. Coming in at number 2 we have the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The Beast of Bodmin Moor is a phantom cat purported to live in Cornwall, England. The creature is said to be panther-like and black-furred, with it stalking around Bodmin Moor killing livestock. Sightings of the beast were reported back in 1978 after mutilated slain livestock were found in the area. Some people propose that the beast had escaped from a zoo, and as it was illegal to own one privately, the former owner could not report it to the police. It has been claimed that animal trainer Mary Chipperfield had released 3 pumas into the wild following the closure of her Plymouth Zoo in 1978, and perhaps this is what gave rise to rumours of the beast. Jumping forward to 1995, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Food conducted an official investigation, with there being no verifiable evidence of exotic felines loose in Britain, and that instead the livestock could have been killed by indigenous species. However, less than a week after the government report, a boy was walking by the River Fowey when he discovered a large cat skull, measuring about 4 inches long by 7 inches wide. The skull was lacking its lower jaw, but possessed 3 sharp prominent canines that suggest it may have been a leopard. It was immediately sent to the Natural History Museum in London for verification, with them determining that it was a genuine skull from a young male leopard. And finally, in at number 1 we have Spring-Heeled Jack. Originating from Victoria-era Britain, Spring-Heeled Jack is a character from urban legend that was first supposedly sighted back in 1837. However, over the years more frequent tales have emerged. His name is said to come from his ability to leap over great distances and heights. Not too shabby. The very first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack came in October of 1837, when a woman named Mary Stevens was walking to Lavender Hill when a tall-coated man leapt from the building into the street. He then grabbed her with his metal claws and kissed her before tearing at her clothes. After her screams were heard, he fled the scene, leaping back into the building he came from. Following the encounter, more accounts occurred, with the most notable being the Alsop case. The Alsop case was one of the most widespread stories about Jack, with it being published in several newspapers. Jane Alsop recalls the moments when she was attacked, stating, "I answered the door of my father's house to a man claiming to be a police officer, who told me to bring a light, claiming, 'We have caught Spring-Heeled Jack here in the lane.' I brought the person a candle and noticed that he wore a large cloak. The moment I had handed him the candle, however, he threw off the cloak and presented a most hideous and frightful appearance, vomiting blue and white flame from his mouth while his eyes resembled red balls of fire. She also reported that he wore a large helmet and that his clothing, which appeared tight-fitting, resembled white oilskin. No one was ever caught and identified as Spring-Heeled Jack, which of course led to numerous theories of his nature and identity. Skeptical investigators have dismissed these stories though and claim Spring-Heeled Jack is a product of mass hysteria, which developed around various stories of a boogeyman and devil. Coming in at number 5 we have the Expressionless. According to this very bizarre legend, a nameless woman arrived at the Cedars-Sinai Hospital back in June of 1972 wearing a bloodied white gown. Now, what set this woman apart from the rest of the patients in the hospital was that she had a mannequin-like appearance, yet moved fluently like any normal person. Her face was devoid of facial features, and on top of all of that, the woman had a kitten inside of her mouth, which she pulled out before collapsing to the ground. Now, she was quickly rushed into a room and prepped for sedation, with the staff opting to restrain her just in case. However, when they attempted to inject her, the woman immediately fought back. She then rose from the bed and revealed razor-sharp teeth that were seemingly impossible to fit into her mouth. She then attacked one of the doctors, sinking her teeth firmly into his neck, killing him quickly. When authorities arrived, they couldn't restrain her, with the woman killing everyone in the hospital, with only one nurse surviving the onslaught, dubbing the woman the Expressionless. Since that day, there has never been a sighting of her, perhaps because she isn't real. What I don't understand is why she had a kitten in her mouth. That is the most bizarre part of the entire thing. Now, the origin behind this legend, it was uploaded on the internet, appearing on Creepypasta back in June of 2012. Coming in at number 4, we have Lavender Town Syndrome. This is a popular urban legend amongst gamers, specifically those who played Pokemon Red and Green in Japan. This legend began back in 1996 when there was an apparent peak in suicides and sickness in folks between the ages of 7 to 12 years old. Rumors began to spread that illness occurred in children who reached Lavender Town in Pokemon, with it being said that the town's theme music had extremely high-pitched frequencies that may have resulted in folks becoming sick or even taking their own lives. Due to this frequency, it is said that around 200 people took their own lives or developed illnesses and afflictions, with some complaining of severe headaches after listening to the music. The mass hysteria ultimately resulted in the programmers fixing the music to be at a lower frequency, and since then no complaints have been made. In Pokemon Gold, Silver and Crystal, the Lavender Town music was recomposed altogether to be happier, and the Pokemon Tower was demolished and replaced with the Kanto Radio Tower. The Lavender Town theme was also re-recorded for the 2017 Pokemon Go Halloween event. In at number 3, we have the disappearance of Ashley, Kansas. Now, this is a bizarre urban legend, but one of my favorites on this entire list. It is said that back in 1952, an anomalous incident occurred in the town of Ashley, Kansas. However, it should be noted that this isn't, nor has ever been, a real place. Sorry to burst your bubble. However, the legend states that back in 1952, an earthquake occurred in the middle of the night, resulting in strange happenings. Specifically, the town of Ashley, Kansas abruptly disappearing. When police went to investigate, they found nothing, only a smoldering burning fissure. It was said that the 679 residents of the town were missing. However, the search for them was called off after 12 days of searching. The legend also goes on to state that not long after, yet another earthquake occurred, and this time when the police went to investigate, the burning fissure was gone and the town was still nowhere to be seen. And that is all that is known about Ashley, Kansas, the town that supposedly disappeared overnight. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have the Russian sleep experiment. This urban legend emerged a few years back in 2010, so sorry to disappoint in advance, but this one is certainly not real, but that doesn't stop folks from speculating. Now, the legend itself recounts a supposed experiment that took place in the late 1940s in a Soviet test facility. According to the legend, 5 prisoners were kept in a sealed gas chamber with a continually administered airborne stimulant, which kept them awake for 30 consecutive days. Now, the prisoners volunteered for the experiment under the false promise that they would be released after the 30 days. For the first few days of the experiment, the prisoners behaved normally, chatting with one another and even talking to researchers through the one-way glass. However, over the subsequent days, things quickly turned much darker. After 9 days, one of the prisoners began screaming uncontrollably for hours on end, while the other prisoners seemingly had no reaction to the odd outburst. The man ultimately screamed for so long that his vocal cords burst, which makes me feel physically sick. I know this isn't real, but the idea of that happening is disgusting. Not long after, a second prisoner began screaming, while the others prevented the researchers from looking in by pasting torn book pages to the windows with their own feces. A few more days passed and things went silent, and after 15 days, the researchers decided to turn off the stimulant and enter the room. What they found was absolutely disgusting. One of the prisoners was deceased and the 4 remaining survivors had performed severe mutilation on themselves, tearing tearing off their own flesh and removing their own organs. Coming in at 5, Arlington Screaming Bridge. Now this Texas legend will quite honestly make your hair stand on end. Legend has it that one full night more than 50 years ago, several teens were carpooling home after their high school football game. Still riled up over the victory, driving responsibly definitely wasn't of utmost importance to the young teens. The bridge running through Arlington's River Legacy Park was just wide enough for one car at a time. You can probably guess where this is going. The teens hooting and hollering drowned out all the noise, like that of a vehicle that had no working headlights. The cars collided head-on before erupting in a fiery explosion and plunging into the waters below. Nobody survived. The bridge is now closed to vehicular traffic, with the site only accessed on foot. However, it now has a new name gifted to it by locals, Screaming Bridge, a name which was coined after the first brave souls went exploring along the bridge and experienced events that can only be explained by the supernatural. Legend has it, if you stand on the bridge and gaze into the river below, you'll see a tombstone for each of the deceased with their names, date of birth, and death. Visit at midnight on the anniversary and you'll hear two cars screeching towards each other before colliding. Coming in at 4, the nurse at Bexar County Hospital. If you ever find yourself in Texas, whatever you do not find yourself at the dilapidated Bexar County Hospital, because it is supposedly housing the spirit based on an American serial killer called Janine Jones. Now, the real-life killer is responsible for the deaths of up to 60 infants and children in her care as a licensed vocational nurse during the 1970s and 1980s. In 1994, she was convicted of murder and was sentenced to 99 years in prison with triple credit. Now, the legend of the nurse at Bexar County Hospital is similar treading, with legend stating that a murderous spirit used to wander the halls killing patients in order of their room number, first 201, then 202, 203, 204. It began in one ward where patients all began asking about one particular nurse. However, when the staff checked the security camera, they found the patients speaking to seemingly no one. They saw the curtains close on their own, tracheotomy tubes get pulled out by an unseen force, but then, very quickly, the patients began dying in their room number order. Like I said, many Bexar County locals believe the legend to be based off of Janine Jones, but what do you guys think? Coming in at 3, Summit Elementary School. In Amarillo, Texas, there's a haunting legend surrounding a closed and abandoned school that everyone avoids. The Summit Elementary School is one of the most haunted locations in all of Texas, and its dark history makes it a hub for ghosts and spirits alike. The school was open up until 1972 and is haunted for numerous reasons, including a janitor who killed students and stuck them in the boiler, racially motivated murders that took place in the school, and murdered prostitutes hidden in the walls. These are just a few of the legends surrounding the terrifying building. Worse still, legend has it that if you're brave enough to visit the abandoned school at night, your car may do strange things. Swings will move by themselves and you might even hear voices coming from the walls. Honestly, this school is beginning to sound like the one from Marianne, which is a French horror series you all need to watch immediately. Do it. The Queen demands it. Coming in at 2, the Candy Lady. Now, this very well might be one of the scariest urban legends I've ever read and may result in a lot of you sleeping with the light on tonight. Sorry in advance. This theory goes, I quote, "The Candy Lady allegedly lures children to their doom by leaving enticing goodies on their windowsills just before bedtime. Her plan is for the kids to wait for mum and dad to fall asleep before indulging in the sweet treats so as not to get in trouble. Afterwards, she'll grab them and feast on their sugar-laden blood until there isn't any left. Children began to go missing, yet no leads were ever found that would suggest they were kidnapped or ran away. As some of the remaining children got older, they confessed to eating candy left on their windowsills with a note from the Candy Lady, so parents started to wonder if the other children perhaps had been poisoned. The worry was soon put to rest when someone actually turned up dead. Not a child though, but a sheriff's deputy who had been investigating the disappearances. His eyes had been stabbed out with a fork and his pockets stuffed with candy. A farmer also found a child-sized set of teeth inside a candy wrapper one morning while tending to his fields. Very creepy. The legend still remains in Texas, and whenever children go missing, people are very quick to blame the Candy Lady. And finally coming in at number 1, Black-Eyed Children. Black-Eyed Children or Black-Eyed Kids are a contemporary legend of supposed paranormal creatures that resemble children between the ages of 6 and 16 with pale skin and black eyes who are reportedly seen hitchhiking or are encountered on doorsteps of residential homes. Now, children are creepy already. They say strange things and their innocence allows them to breach the barrier between the living and the dead that we jaded adults just don't possess. However, the Black-Eyed Children legend is one for the history books and is downright terrifying. In the late 90s, a journalist named Brian Bethel was working in his town of Abilene, Texas, when he encountered something he'll never forget. He was parked outside a movie theater when 2 children knocked on his window. Brian couldn't quite understand why, but he was completely overcome with fear at the sight of them. He rolled down the window regardless, and the kids asked him for a ride back to their home so that they could get cash for the movie. His fear, however, made him hesitate, but the children were persistent. They then began to say some weird things, like, "We're not armed" or anything. Brian looked back at the kids and noticed how their eyes had turned pitch black. They then began screaming at him that they could only come in the car if he invited them in, so he quickly drove away. He spread the word about the Black-Eyed Children and was surprised when a lot of other people came forward reporting similar experiences.